Deep beneath the golden sands of ancient Mesopotamia, the magnificent ruins of the city of Nineveh are preserving a shocking secret. The marks of time remain upon tens of thousands of clay tablets engraved with cuneiform writing. These extraordinary inscriptions recount a story extending far beyond every boundary of human imagination. Primordial history is honoring the Anunnaki, powerful beings who descended to Earth from the stars. According to the most accurate translations of the Sumerian tablets, this group of ancient gods arrived upon the Earth 400,000 years ago. The reason for their arrival centered upon one single ambition: extracting gold in order to protect the atmosphere of their home planet. When the mining work demanded an overwhelming level of labor, they decided to create a workforce to take over the task. Through sophisticated DNA modification technology, the Anunnaki directly implanted their genes into native creatures. Could those native creatures have been our ancestors? If this is true, Darwin's theory of evolution may be the most spectacular deception ever used to manipulate human understanding throughout the past several hundred years. And the extraordinary intelligence and rapid advancement of our ancestors in the distant past may have been the result of sophisticated extraterrestrial technology. So, are the Anunnaki still secretly manipulating systems of power and finance across the entire world? Are we still working tirelessly in service of their long-term plan? Welcome to SleepCodex. In today's video, we will travel back through time and fully explore the messages concealed upon the ancient Sumerian clay tablets. We will trace the true origin of the Anunnaki, decode the story of the planet Nibiru, the first gold mines, the rebellion of the laboring gods, and the experiment believed to have created humanity hundreds of thousands of years ago. More importantly, we will compare these accounts with archaeology, the Bible, the history of civilizations, and the very systems of power operating throughout the modern world. Stay with us until the final minute, because the last secret will carry us beyond the ruined temples of Sumer and directly into your life today. An ancient trace is still present in the way humanity builds cities, accumulates gold, organizes power, and serves systems greater than itself. The truth about the gold mines and the origin of humanity. You know, most ancient civilizations affirm that human beings appeared upon the earth to carry out a specific mission. But when we open the texts of Mesopotamia, that mission takes on a practical character, so chilling that it becomes disturbing. Humanity was created for the purpose of taking over all the exhausting labor from the gods who were being drained of their strength. This ancient detail ignited a shocking modern hypothesis. According to the famous interpretation of the ancient astronaut theory, the home planet of the Anunnaki, known as Nibiru, once suffered a devastating atmospheric catastrophe. The life-sustaining shield surrounding it deteriorated severely, forcing them to search for a material that could be dispersed into microscopic particles within the atmosphere. Gold immediately captured their attention because of its stability, its ability to reflect radiation, and its extraordinary chemical durability. The Earth became the ideal destination for this group of beings because it possessed an extremely abundant supply of this precious mineral. Within this version of the conspiracy theory, the Anunnaki landed upon the Earth approximately 400,000 years ago, established large-scale gold mining operations, and personally labored within deep underground mines. After thousands of years of excavation, the workforce became exhausted and began rebelling in order to demand relief. The supreme rulers then proposed a cold solution: create a new species intelligent enough to operate tools, while also possessing an obedient nature capable of carrying the entire enormous burden of labor. And my friend, the new creature born from that engineering project, was the ancestor of you and me. At this point, many of you may be wondering, Has the educational system not always proclaimed that humanity represents the magnificent pinnacle of evolution? Yet, the Anunnaki hypothesis exposes a completely opposite history, declaring that human beings began as a workforce specially designed to serve the survival needs of a more powerful group of beings. Now it is time to move directly into the actual evidence preserved upon the original clay tablets. The story of Nibiru, the damaged atmosphere, and microscopic particles of gold belongs to the modern world's interpretation of the Anunnaki. Within Mesopotamian cuneiform texts, the word Nibiru appears as an astronomical title associated with Marduk and the concept of a crossing point or passage in the sky. Some traditions connect it with the star of Marduk or the planet Jupiter. The surviving texts describe Nibiru as firmly established within Babylonian astronomy and theology, presenting an image completely different from that of a home planet desperately seeking gold to repair its atmosphere. What is extraordinarily compelling is that the central core of the hypothesis remains deeply rooted in a clear reality found within the ancient texts. These documents plainly record that the gods once performed physical labor. They exhausted themselves digging canals, transporting soil, and maintaining the structure of the world. After a long period of time, they raised the banner of rebellion because the burden of labor had exceeded their endurance. And so humanity was molded for the purpose of taking over that enormous amount of work. The Sumerian text, known as Enki and Ninmah, describes the lower-ranking gods laboring endlessly to dig canals, dredge clay, and bend beneath exhausting work, while the higher-ranking gods enjoyed the privilege of supervision. Their complaints ultimately led to the decision to create human beings from clay taken from the region of the Abzu. This new workforce immediately assumed a subordinate position and performed all physical labor within a new social order. The Akkadian epic Apparatus presents this argument far more directly. The birth goddess is commanded to create humanity so that human beings may bear the yoke and carry the entire burden of labor originally assigned to the gods. The surviving copies recount the formation of humanity from clay combined with the blood and flesh of a sacrificed god. The purpose appears with extraordinary clarity. Human beings would take over the work so that the gods could completely cast off the burden. This is the central detail that makes the genetic modification hypothesis especially attractive to the modern human mind. The ancient Mesopotamians used the language of clay divine blood and birth goddesses. By contrast, we modern human beings view the same story through the lens of cells, embryos, and DNA sequences. One side describes the essence of a god blending with the material of the earth. The other interprets that event through the concept of inserting advanced genetic material into a native organism. Although the ancient texts use vocabulary completely different from concepts such as genes, laboratories, or DNA modification, the image of a new species formed through the combination of primordial matter and a divine component still establishes a firm foundation for the entire modern Anunnaki hypothesis. And this is also the part that makes the story of humanity's historical origin appear even clearer. Your body is composed of elements already present within the earth. Yet, intelligence, linguistic ability, moral consciousness, and the rapid ascent of human civilization continually drive us to search for our deeper origin. The immense gap between the biological body and cognitive ability has created fertile ground for the hypothesis of intervention by an outside power. The clay tablets of Nineveh. All these shocking secrets are preserved in northern Iraq, sleeping deeply beneath the ruins of the ancient city of Nineveh. Major excavations there began to flourish during the middle of the 19th century. Austin Henry Layard discovered the first large collection of clay tablets in the year 1850. His Iraqi associate, Hormuzd Rassam, continued excavating another palace in the year 1852. And brought another enormous archive of texts into the light. In total, more than 30,000 clay tablets and fragments bearing cuneiform writing were removed from the ruins of Nineveh. This was the royal library of King Ashurbanipal, the Assyrian king who ruled during the 7th century before Christ. Many tablets were produced through copying during his own reign, carrying the mission of preserving Babylonian and Sumerian traditions that were far older. The library contained medical texts, astronomical records, rituals, prayers, omens, creation epics, and accounts of the Great Flood. Therefore, rather than being original reports produced during the 3rd millennium before Christ, these materials are actually an enormous collection assembled through the efforts of the Assyrians to preserve intact the memory of many generations of Mesopotamian civilization. Consider the magnitude of this discovery. Before the library appeared, much of the modern world knew Assyria only through the Bible and classical writers. After the historic excavation, the Mesopotamians began recounting their own history in their native languages. Stories once regarded as scattered legends now appeared clearly upon clay tablets that allowed scholars to read, compare, and examine the evidence directly. Among the most prominent discoveries were fragments of Apparatuses and Numa Elish, and the Epic of Gilgamesh texts that describe in detail the creation of humanity, the Council of the Gods, the Great Flood, and the governing order of the entire universe. The image is often called Anunnaki technology. Look closely at the Assyrian reliefs that appear so frequently in videos about the Anunnaki. At the center, there is always a sacred tree rising high, with 2 winged figures standing protectively on either side. Above its crown appears a majestic winged disc. Upon the wrists of the figures are large circular objects whose design appears remarkably similar to modern electronic devices. These unmistakable details have persuaded millions of people that the Assyrians were preserving images of aircraft smartwatches and technology used to care for a genetic tree of life. Even so, most of these famous reliefs came from the palace of Ashurnasirpal II at Nimrud, completed approximately between 883 and 859 before Christ. Museums identify the winged figures as protective beings belonging to the mythological world of Assyria. The pine cone-shaped object held in their hands is called by an Akkadian term meaning purifying object, while the small bucket is closely associated with rituals of sprinkling water or the symbolic pollination of date palms. Archaeologists identify the circular objects upon their wrists as decorative bracelets bearing the rosette symbol, a motif representing divinity and closely associated with the goddess Ishtar. The winged disc appears as a symbol of the authority of the god Ashur or the sun god Shamash. The sacred tree represents prosperity, the fertility of the land, and the stable order of the Assyrian Empire. The reality is this archaeology sees purification rituals, symbols of divine authority and art created to protect the royal court. Meanwhile, the Anunnaki hypothesis sees handheld devices, biotechnology, and modern flying vehicles. It is the same image, yet 2 interpretive systems guide the viewer toward conclusions that stand worlds apart. The enormous scale of the figures within these reliefs must also be understood according to the principles of ancient art. Gods, kings, and supernatural beings were always carved on a gigantic scale in order to honor their status, power, and sacred nature. The image communicates supreme authority rather than reflecting actual biological height. A record of creating humanity. The hybridization of the Anunnaki and native organisms plays the most dramatic role within the modern hypothesis. According to this interpretation, extraterrestrial engineers selected a primitive human species already living upon the Earth, then inserted their own genetic material into embryos in order to shape Homo sapiens. Yet when we return to the ancient texts, we encounter a story expressed in the language of religion rather than the language of a laboratory. In Enki and Ninmah, clay is taken from the Abzu and formed into the human body. The birth goddesses perform the work of shaping it, while Enki determines the position and duty of the new creature. In Atrahasis, the goddess Nintu molds humanity from prepared clay, combined with the blood of the god Geshtue. This workforce then immediately receives the responsibility of carrying the labor of the gods. Following the same pattern, Enuma Elish recounts that Marduk used the blood of Kingu to create humanity, continuing the same motif. A divine element blends with the material of the earth to form human beings. The book of Genesis presents a different theology. God forms Adam from the dust of the ground, breathes the breath of life into his nostrils, and gives humanity the dignity of beings who carry the image of the Creator. Human beings enjoy life, while caring for the garden as stewards, rather than bearing the status of a slave race born to free the gods from physical labor. Both traditions use the imagery of earth and divine breath, yet their understanding of human value moves in two separate directions. Mesopotamian texts continually emphasize that humanity was created to carry the labor of the gods. Genesis emphasizes that human beings carry the image of God and receive the honor of governing creation. And this is the explosive point that the Anunnaki hypothesis fully exploits. Look deeply into this strange similarity and draw your own conclusion. From Mesopotamia and Egypt to the distant Americas, numerous primordial civilizations selected earth or clay as the central material used to explain the formation of the human body. This consistency ignites a shocking debate among researchers. The first possibility is that clay was simply the material most familiar to agricultural societies, and therefore they used it to define their biological origin. The second possibility is far more practical and far more disturbing. This is the collective memory of all humanity concerning an actual process of biological intervention. Cosmic engineers use the abundant minerals of this planet, blending them with their superior genetic code, to manufacture a biological machine known as the human race. Immediately after completing the physical form, this genetic project entered the stage of expanding intellectual ability. According to the historical accounts, the cosmic engineers within the Anunnaki hypothesis immediately assumed the role of teachers. They directly transmitted complex systems of language measurement algorithms, agricultural techniques, and numerous basic survival skills to the new workforce. This training process took place at extraordinary speed, forcing the brain of primitive human beings to advance tremendously within an extremely short period of time. The reason is very easy to understand. A workforce needed to comprehend commands clearly in order to perform its duties smoothly. The motif of heavenly beings directly giving knowledge to humanity spreads powerfully throughout every major religious tradition. The Quran plainly records the event in which Allah taught Adam the specific names of all things, and then required him to declare all those names before the angels. This transmission transformed knowledge into a great privilege, immediately enabling humanity to occupy the dominant position within the ecosystem. Our brains suddenly possess the ability to name, classify, and control the surrounding world. Across the ocean, the sacred book Popol Vuh of the Quiche Maya describes in detail multiple experimental cycles carried out by the creators while forming humanity. In the first version, the wooden human beings failed completely because of their severe limitations in memory and their inability to recognize the Creator. That experimental project was immediately destroyed to make way for a more highly optimized version. This time, complete humanity was formed from maize. Suddenly, they possessed the full ability to speak, the capacity for logical thought, and the consciousness needed to worship those above them. This upgrade closely resembles updating a version of artificial intelligence so that it can serve its owners more effectively. Looking toward ancient Egyptian culture, the system of assigned responsibilities among the gods appears with extraordinary clarity. The god Thoth holds the role of embodiment of wisdom writing systems and scientific knowledge. Working closely beside him, the goddess Seshat directly protects record-keeping mathematical calculation systems and the techniques used to design great structures. These numerous traditions reflect the ancient world's steadfast belief that the foundational knowledge of human civilization came directly from the divine realm, from beings possessing superior intelligence. Connect all these pieces of information. These cultures tell stories that carry completely distinct identities and serve their own theological systems. Yet the most brilliant point of convergence always rests within one extraordinarily ancient and haunting idea. Humanity received language systems of governing law and an immense treasury of knowledge through direct transmission from a higher source of intelligence. For supporters of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, this is powerful evidence of a global workforce training program. We learned how to speak, how to write, and how to calculate. Fundamentally, so that we could serve a great project belonging to those who came from the sky. And now you yourself are using those gifts at this very moment. You read symbols. You transform sound into meaning. You use language to construct plans. And you transmit knowledge to an entirely new generation that has only just entered the world. This very ability to preserve and transmit information gave humanity the wings to build cities, laws, science, and religion at a speed far surpassing every other living species upon the Earth. For supporters of the Anunnaki hypothesis, this leap bears the clear marks of genetic intervention. In the eyes of archaeology and evolutionary biology, this process developed through hundreds of thousands of years of brain development, language, social cooperation, and cultural accumulation. The ancient texts, meanwhile, offer one profound common message. Human beings were born with a clear purpose, were given knowledge, and were bound to a great order, extending far beyond the simple need for survival. Therefore, the greatest question still lies openly before us. Did engineers from the stars directly program the human form we possess today? Or are the clay tablets using mythological language to explain another truth? Humanity rose from the earth, carried a divine element within itself, and received the honor of operating an entire civilization. The Anunnaki hypothesis maintains its powerful attraction because it combines three authentic details. From the ancient texts, the gods once labored, humanity was created to carry the work, and a divine component blended with the material of the earth. The gold mines, the planet Nibiru, and the DNA laboratory form a modern layer of interpretation constructed around those three central details. And the next scene will bring us to a question carrying many times greater destructive power. If humanity truly began as a workforce, was the first system used to control it the whip religion, or money itself? The images upon the rocks and memories of visitors from the cosmos. You know, long before systems of writing came into existence, human beings preserved their memories by carving images into stone. They recorded the animals they hunted, communal rituals, journeys of migration, and beings that held a special position within their spiritual world. Some carvings are tens of thousands of years old. However, they appeared throughout many different periods, rather than all being created at the same point 12,000 years ago. For this reason, each location must be interpreted according to its own date, culture, and the traditions of the community that created it. In the American Southwest, the ancestors of the Pueblo communities left behind thousands of images carved into cliff walls. Some figures have large heads, elongated bodies, circles surrounding their faces, or details that cause modern viewers to think of helmets and protective suits. At Kachina Bridge in Utah, human figures, animals, and organic forms were carved into the rock more than 700 years ago. The name Kachina Bridge came from an early 20th century surveyor who believed that the dancing human figures might represent the Kachina of the Hopi people. Within Hopi tradition, the Kachina or Katsina are messenger spirits associated with raindrops, ancestors, and communal order. The Hopi believe that these messengers come to live among the villagers during the planting and harvesting seasons, where they are welcomed through dances and sacred ceremonies. Indigenous tradition describes them as spirits belonging to a spiritual order, while images of spacecraft and extraterrestrial visitors belong to the modern interpretation of the ancient astronaut theory. Even so, this association still raises a noteworthy question. Why do so many human figures upon the rocks have circular faces, enlarged heads, and bodies covered in unusual patterns? Archaeologists offer many explanations. These images may record masked dancers, ceremonial figures, ancestor spirits, or stories of migration. The United States National Park Service also acknowledges that the precise meanings of many carvings still cannot be determined. Descendant communities sometimes recognize familiar symbols, but different individuals may offer different interpretations. The ancient astronaut hypothesis follows a bolder direction. According to this reading, the masks are helmets. The halos surrounding the heads are luminous devices, and the spirits from the sky are visitors who once landed within the desert. Now broaden your view across the world. At Val Camonica in northern Italy, more than 140,000 carvings were created upon approximately 2,400 rock surfaces over a period of more than 8,000 years. They portray hunting, agriculture, warfare, dancing, boating, and numerous geometric forms carrying ceremonial meanings. Among them are figures with radiant lines spreading around their heads, often called the astronauts of Val Camonica in videos about extraterrestrials. UNESCO, however, places them within the complete religious system and daily life of the ancient inhabitants of the valley. Unusual human figures also appear throughout many regions of Asia, Africa, and South America. Some wear masks, some possess animal heads, and some stand beside the sun's stars or circular objects. For those who believe in extraterrestrial intervention, this repetition reflects a deliberate system. Visitors from the sky once landed in numerous locations, interacted directly with human beings, and left their memories within rock art. Archaeology offers a more cautious interpretation. Human beings across the world all observed the sky-used masks in ceremonies and combined human and animal features to express spiritual power. Similar images could have appeared independently because people shared the same bodies, environments, and questions about life. You, I, and anyone standing before an ancient carving all face the same limitation. The artist died thousands of years ago and left no caption behind. The surface of the stone remains intact, but its original meaning has only been partially preserved. It is this empty space that allows the hypothesis of cosmic visitors to continue existing. The code within the Lascaux caves and humanity's great leap forward. Next, follow me into the network of Lascaux caves located in southwestern France. Lascaux is commonly described as a work of art approximately 17,000 years old. New studies published by the French Ministry of Culture are placing many of the images between 19,000 and 21,000 years ago, while also acknowledging that precise dating still contains questions requiring further research. The entire cave contains approximately 680 paintings and 1,500 engravings. Most of the images portray horses, bison deer, ibexes, and other animals that lived within the Ice Age environment. Human figures appear extremely rarely. All of Lascaux contains only one figure, with a clearly human form, located within an area 8 meters deep, commonly known as the shaft of the dead man. The figure possesses a human body, outstretched arms, and a head resembling that of a bird. Before him stands a wounded bison. Nearby, a bird appears perched upon an object resembling a staff, along with the image of a rhinoceros leaving the scene. Archaeological language refers to images combining human beings and animals as therianthropes. This is an extremely rare type of figure within Paleolithic art and is often studied as evidence of symbolic thought, mythological stories, or ceremonial beliefs. The bird-headed figure at Lascaux carries certain features that cause modern viewers to associate it with Thoth, the Egyptian god, with the head of an ibis, who was connected with writing measurement and knowledge. Those who believe in the Anunnaki hypothesis also place this figure beside the winged and bird-headed gods found within Mesopotamian art. The similarity lies in the combination of human and bird characteristics. However, Lascaux predates the Egyptian and Sumerian civilizations by tens of thousands of years, and we possess no direct chain of historical evidence connecting these three traditions. Therefore, the association with Thoth, or the Anunnaki, belongs to symbolic comparison rather than an identity confirmed by archaeology. Some researchers believe that the scene within the shaft of the dead man may record a hunting accident. Others interpret it as a mythological story or a ceremony connected with the trance state of a shaman. The official Lascaux website also presents these possibilities and leaves the conclusion open. because the true meaning of the scene has yet to be deciphered. The ancient astronaut hypothesis offers another possibility. The bird-headed figure represents a higher being whom ancient people encountered during ceremonies, dreams, or altered states of consciousness. Shamans within many cultures use drumming rhythms, dancing sensory isolation, and extended ceremonies to enter states of trance. Such experiences can create the sensation of leaving the body, meeting spirits, or entering another world. Ancient people understood these experiences through spiritual language. Some modern researchers attempt to explain them through neurological activity, psychology, and culture. You may have awakened from a dream so powerful that the emotions remained intact for many hours. Our ancestors also experienced such states, but they lived within a world that had not yet separated dreams, religion, and ordinary daily life. The images upon the rocks may have become their way of recording experiences that words were unable to express. The most fiercely debated point appears when we place Lascaux within the complete history of the development of Homo sapiens. For many decades, researchers described the period approximately 40,000 years ago as a behavioral revolution. Cave art, musical instruments, jewelry, burial ceremonies, and complex tools appeared clearly throughout Europe. This once created the impression that human intelligence had suddenly awakened within a short period of time. The Anunnaki hypothesis views this leap as a sign of intervention by an outside hand. According to this interpretation, a group of advanced beings modified the genetic code, transmitted knowledge, or activated cognitive abilities that had remained dormant within our ancestors. However, the present archaeological record reveals a more complex process. Beads and engravings in Africa have been dated to more than 70,000 years ago. An ochre drawing from Blombos Cave has been dated to approximately 73,000 years ago. Cave art in Sulawesi, Indonesia also appeared approximately 40,000 years ago, at nearly the same time as the oldest surviving works in Europe. Therefore, human symbolic intelligence developed through a long process across many regions rather than appearing overnight in Europe. This still leaves one fascinating question. Why did a primate species that once survived through hunting and gathering develop the ability to tell stories, create images, construct ceremonies, and transmit ideas across tens of thousands of years? Evolutionary biology explains this process through the development of the brain-language working memory and the ability to cooperate socially. The ancient astronaut hypothesis sees the marks of a deliberate upgrade. Lascaux has not provided the final answer. It reveals something more certain. Tens of thousands of years ago, the human mind was already capable of creating a complex, symbolic world and preserving it upon stone. The deciphered message from Nineveh, the genetic laboratory of the Anunnaki. Let us return to northern Iraq during the middle of the 19th century. During excavations at the mound of Kuyunjik in Nineveh, Austin, Henry Layard, and his associates brought the palace of King Sennacherib and a large number of clay tablets into the light. Hormuzd Rassam and later excavation teams continued expanding the archive. In total, more than 30,000 clay tablets and fragments bearing cuneiform writing were discovered among the ruins of Nineveh. Within this collection were fragments belonging to the 7 tablets of the Babylonian creation, epic Enuma Elish. The copies at Nineveh belong to the Neo-Assyrian period, but the story developed from older Babylonian traditions. Fragments of Tablet 6. The section recounting the creation of humanity were also discovered by Layard and other excavators at Kuyunjik. The text recounts that after his victory over Tiamat, the god Marduk reorganized the universe and assigned duties to the gods. To release them from labor, Marduk decided to create human beings. Kingu, the god who had led the forces of Tiamat, was executed. His blood was used to form humanity. This is the very detail that the ancient astronaut hypothesis interprets as a genetic record. Blood carries biological information. Clay provides the material of the earth. a component originating from the divine realm, is combined with native matter to create a new species. Within Babylonian language, this is a theological account of human origins and humanity's obligation to serve the gods. Within modern language, many people see a hybridization process. Genetic material is taken from an advanced being and inserted into a body already existing upon the earth. The Anunnaki force created a perfect prototype. The Bible records this prototype under the name Adam. This is the central interpretation of the modern Anunnaki hypothesis. However, the clay tablets do not mention the cells of a female ape DNA. DNA sequences laboratories or numerous experimental embryos. These details appeared within modern interpretations most prominently during the second half of the 20th century. The Mesopotamian texts directly speak of clay divine blood birth goddesses and the purpose of creating humanity to carry the burden of labor. The book of Genesis records that God created Adam from the dust of the ground and breathed the breath of life into his nostrils. Compared with Atrahasis and Enuma Elish, the story is shorter, but its theological emphasis is also different. Human beings within Genesis carry the image of God and receive authority to govern and care for creation. They possess the dignity of representatives rather than merely serving as a workforce. Therefore, the statement that the Bible removed the central details belongs to the argument of the Anunnaki hypothesis. The academic view generally holds that Mesopotamian texts in Genesis share several ancient cultural motifs from the Near East, and then develop those motifs according to different theological systems. Listen very carefully to what comes next. The name Anunnaki is often translated within modern videos as those who descended from heaven to earth. However, specialists in the Sumerian and Akkadian languages have not accepted this translation. The University of Pennsylvania's database of Mesopotamian deities identifies the Anunna, or Anunnaki, as a group of major gods within the Mesopotamian pantheon. The most probable interpretation is closer to those of royal lineage, or the offspring of the prince. During certain periods, the Anunnaki were associated with determining fate. Within later texts, the name sometimes refers to gods of the underworld. The number and membership of the group changed according to each city and each historical period. Scholars also confirm that no surviving image has yet been identified with certainty as a collective portrait of the Anunnaki. Therefore, the image of the Anunnaki emerging from enormous spacecraft and carrying genetic technology belongs to the ancient astronaut model. It was constructed by interpreting divine stories through the language of modern science. The hypothesis remains compelling for one very clear reason. Ancient texts repeatedly recount that the gods created human beings, gave them skills, and organized civilization. Modern people know that blood carries DNA. Embryos can be manipulated, and a species can be altered through genetic editing. The two systems of language begin to touch one another, although direct evidence of an Anunnaki laboratory has yet to appear. Your body carries almost the entire evolutionary history of life upon the earth. At the same time, your mind possesses the ability to read the very clay tablets written thousands of years ago and ask questions about its own origin. It is this combination that makes the Anunnaki story so difficult to ignore. The mark of the Sirius, B star system, and physical evidence. You can easily recognize the connections that supporters of the Anunnaki hypothesis place beside one another across the world. In Sierra Leone, stone statues, commonly known as the Nomoli, possess large heads, prominent eyes, and unusual bodies. In Mali, the famous story of the Dogon people claims that they knew of the small companion star of Sirius before modern astronomy confirmed its existence. In Babylon, the name of the god Dagon is often linked with Dogon because of their similar sounds. In Japan, the Dogu clay figurines with large eyes are compared with astronaut suits. From this point, the hypothesis reaches the conclusion that these cultures once received the same group of beings from the Sirius B star system. However, each link must be examined separately. The Nomoli statues, officially preserved at the Smithsonian and the British Museum, are made from stone steatite or soapstone. Many works have been dated to approximately the 15th through 17th centuries, while some older records retain uncertain dates. Researchers associate them with the Sapi communities and other peoples of Sierra Leone, rather than with an extraterrestrial civilization. The story of a sphere of pure chromium found inside a 17,000-year-old statue has been widely circulated upon websites devoted to mysterious artifacts. However, the records of major museums preserving Nomoli statues have not confirmed the existence of such an object. Official catalogs identify the materials as stone steatite or soapstone and place many of the statues within a range of several hundred years old, rather than 17,000 years. This means that the story of the chromium sphere currently remains a claim without a reliable archaeological record through which it can be tested. The Dogon story concerning Sirius also began with the research of Marcel Grohl and Germain Dieterlen during the middle of the 20th century. They claimed that Dogon priests possessed complex knowledge concerning Sirius and a small star orbiting it. After many years of field research, the anthropologist Walter van Beek was unable to reconfirm the system of Sirius knowledge in the form previously described by Grohl. He also recorded that many Dogon people within the areas of study had no knowledge of the famous story attributed to them within Western books and articles. This issue remains a debate concerning methods of collecting information, the influence of interviewers, and the possibility that modern knowledge entered the community before it was recorded. The name Dogon and the name of the god Dagon also belong to completely different linguistic contexts. Similarity in sound does not create a historical connection. Continuing to Japan. Dogu figurines were created during the Jomon period and commonly possess extremely large eyes, dense patterns, and highly stylized bodies. Some famous examples are called goggle-eyed Dogu because their eyes resemble snow goggles. This is the very detail that causes them to appear frequently within videos about ancient astronauts. Japanese museums and the Metropolitan Museum, however, view Dogu as ceremonial objects commonly possessing female forms and possibly associated with fertility, healing, or beliefs concerning spirits within nature. Many of the figurines were deliberately broken before being buried or discarded, indicating that they held a role within a specific ceremony rather than serving as portraits of extraterrestrials. Therefore, the physical artifacts are entirely real. The Nomoli are real. The Dogu are real. The carvings at Val Camonica, the American Southwest, and Lascaux are also real. The debate lies within the way they are interpreted. Archaeology places each artifact within the culture, ceremony, and historical period that produced it. The ancient astronaut hypothesis gathers the similarities of large heads, wide eyes, winged figures, and beings from the sky into one common story concerning extraterrestrial visitors. These explorers are believed to have landed upon the Earth during a particular period, collected precious metals, extracted genetic material, and then departed. Statues resembling astronaut suits and the story of Sirius B are viewed as traces remaining after this contact. The available evidence does not possess enough strength to confirm that conclusion, but it also reveals something worthy of consideration. Ancient human beings across many continents raised their eyes toward the sky, placed the origin of knowledge among the gods, and created images extending far beyond ordinary activities of survival. You are standing within a position your ancestors never possessed. You have telescopes capable of looking deeply into space. You possess DNA technology capable of reading the structure of life. You have digital databases that allow artifacts from many continents to be placed beside one another within only a few seconds. For this reason, our responsibility contains two parts to preserve an open mind toward great possibilities, while also examining every claim through its date, the origin of the artifact, and the original text. The images upon the rocks may represent memories of gods, ceremonies, dreams, ancestors, or visitors from another world. The clay tablets may represent creation myths, historical memories transformed by religion, or the ancient world's way of describing a process their language was not yet capable of naming. The question remains, did humanity build its own intelligence through hundreds of thousands of years of development? Or did an outside force enter at the decisive moment, transmit knowledge, modify the species, and leave its marks within the memories of many cultures? The next section will carry this investigation to a place where the traces become more practical than art and mythology. The first Sumerian cities, where systems of labor, taxation, debt, and power began controlling human life. Hashtag spacecraft debris in Sierra Leone and the Code of Gold. The Nomoli statues, the strange carvings, and the story of the Sirius star system have only brought us to the part of memory preserved in stone. But in Sierra Leone, the investigation moves one important step further. Here people claim to have found a real object that can be held in the hand, unusual blue stones unearthed in a land famous for gold diamonds and ancient Nomoli statues. Travel with me to this region of West Africa. Local people preserve many stories about Nomoli statues found in fields beneath the soil or near mineral mining areas. Nomoli is the name given to human figures carved from steatite, a soft stone also known as soapstone. The statues, now held in the collections of the British Museum and the Smithsonian, are associated by researchers with the ancient Sapi communities of Sierra Leone. Some are placed around the 15th or 16th century, although the dating of this entire tradition still contains many gaps. Within local life, many statues were discovered by farmers while working the land. They were once placed in fields as rice gods in the hope that the crops would grow well. Other traditions say that they represent ancestors, ancient leaders, or beings who lived before a great event in the distant past. But then another story appeared. According to the legend published by collectors of sky stone, when the Nomoli beings descended to Earth, part of the sky turned into stone and fell with them. Those fragments possess an intense blue color, sometimes crossed by thin white lines, giving the viewer the feeling of holding a piece of the frozen sky within the palm of the hand. In the year 1991, an American diamond and gemstone prospector named David Ledbetter, whose name is sometimes incorrectly written as Ledbetter, said that he discovered this material during an expedition in Sierra Leone. According to information published by those who currently own the collection, Ledbetter found the blue stones after purchasing mining rights in a region containing gold and diamonds, then brought samples back to the United States for analysis. According to the same account, the village chief explained to Ledbetter that the blue stone commonly appeared near places containing gold and diamonds. To local people, it functioned like a guiding sign. Whenever the blue layer appeared, precious minerals might be located in the soil beneath it. This detail was immediately placed beside the Anunnaki story by supporters of the ancient astronaut theory. If cosmic visitors once came to Earth in search of gold, why would a material called a fragment of the sky appear in a region where gold and diamonds were being mined? According to this interpretation, sky stone is more than a strange type of rock. It may be material left behind after an ancient mining operation, buried together with the traces of the beings who once directed that activity. Look at the way modern human beings search for resources. An exploration team commonly leaves behind machinery, protective equipment, construction material, and damaged fragments of metal. Thousands of years later, future generations might discover one small component without understanding which machine it once belonged to. Those who believe in the sky stone story argue that something similar occurred in Sierra Leone. The samples are said to have been sent to several laboratories for examination. Some documents on collectors' websites mention approximately 12 different facilities, including tests conducted at gemological and materials laboratories. The Skystone Collection website claims that one sample was sent to the Gemological Institute of America near the end of 1991 and returned more than 1 year later, with its origin still unidentified. The stories circulating around the samples present widely different results. Some reports say the material contains a large amount of oxygen, along with carbon, silicon, calcium, and sodium. Some people regard it as a synthetic stone ceramic material or a colored binding substance. Others claim that its structure does not correspond with any familiar natural mineral. But this is the important limitation. The complete analytical report, sampling methods, chain of custody, and laboratory data have not been published in a peer-reviewed archaeological or materials science study. Most of the current information comes from private owners, gemstone dealers, television programs, and websites devoted to mysterious research. Therefore, the story that 12 laboratories were all unable to identify it still remains a claim requiring original documentation for verification. Furthermore, the fact that an analysis records a high percentage of oxygen does not mean that the object is made of pure oxygen. Many types of stone, glass, ceramic, and cement contain large amounts of oxygen because this element bonds with silicon, calcium, aluminum, or other elements to form solid compounds. The truly difficult questions concern the origin of the sample, the process that produced its blue color, and the geological circumstances in which it was found. From this empty space, a bold hypothesis was formed. Skystone may be debris from the protective exterior of a spacecraft. The material is believed to have been capable of withstanding heat, providing electrical insulation, or protecting the body of the craft during intense friction with Earth's atmosphere. According to this interpretation, the blue stones are physical remnants of visitors from the Sirius star system. During a landing, a launch, or an accident, material from the exterior of the machine broke away and fell into the land where mineral extraction was taking place. The hypothesis is highly compelling. But at the present time, no published analysis has confirmed that skystone is an aerospace alloy, a heat shield material, or matter originating beyond Earth. The fact that the object has not been clearly identified creates a mystery, while the conclusion that it came from a spacecraft belongs to the reasoning of supporters of the ancient astronaut theory. Even so, Sierra Leone places 3 details before us that are difficult to ignore. The Nomoli statues are real. The blue stone samples preserved by collectors are also real. And the story of their discovery is directly connected with a region rich in gold and diamonds. UI and anyone following this investigation must stand between 2 possibilities. Skystone may be an artificial material of earthly origin, a product of mining ceramic glass, or a binding substance that has not yet been fully identified. It may also preserve traces of an ancient technology that the present record still cannot explain. To move further, we need a sample with a clearly documented origin, a controlled excavation, and analytical results published openly. Until that moment, skystone continues to serve as an incomplete piece of the puzzle, an object suspended between archaeology, local legend, and the hypothesis of beings who once came to Earth in search of gold. The secret record of the Zuni and the message upon the cliff walls. Leaving Africa, we traveled directly to the dry desert region of the state of New Mexico. This is the homeland of the Zuni, one of the oldest Pueblo communities in the American Southwest. Ancestral villages, ancient roads, observatories, and rock carvings reveal that people lived, traveled, and practiced ceremonies within this region throughout many centuries. Zuni tradition contains profound stories concerning ancestors, the spirit world, and messengers associated with the sky. Their belief system places particular emphasis upon the Katsina spirits, who serve as intermediaries and are connected with clouds, rain crops, animals' ancestors, and the natural order. Ethnographic studies describe the Katsina as spiritual messengers represented through masked dancers rather than identifying them as extraterrestrial beings. However, some ancient astronaut writers interpret these traditions differently. They argue that the phrase, "people from the sky," may preserve the memory of beings who truly landed in the desert. These entities, believed to have guided Pueblo ancestors in finding water-cultivating crops within an arid environment, observing astronomical cycles, and building the first communities. Look at the carvings commonly presented as evidence. Some figures have circular or dome-shaped heads. Lines appear around their faces. Their bodies are covered with patterns. Beside them, there are sometimes circles, spirals, or geometric shapes that cause modern viewers to think of flying vehicles. According to the interpretation of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, the domes are machines hovering in the air. The masked figures become pilots wearing breathing equipment. The circles surrounding their heads are interpreted as helmets or luminous systems. From this perspective, the entire cliff wall operates like an ancient news report. The Zuni ancestors had no cameras, telephones, or writing systems of the kind we use today. They used sharp stones to strike each mark into the sandstone surface, attempting to preserve an event important enough for future generations to continue seeing. If ancient people witnessed a metallic object descending from the sky, rock carving may have been the closest tool available to record that scene. But the chronology must be stated accurately. The ancestral Pueblo carvings at El Morro, a site located along the ancient route connecting the Zuni and Acoma regions, are primarily dated between the 13th and 14th centuries after Christ. The two settlements upon the top of the cliff were occupied approximately from 1275 to 1350. Therefore, the claim that all these images date back to 1200 before Christ requires a specific site and a more detailed dating record for confirmation. At Chaco Canyon, the United States National Park Service also notes that an image commonly called a katsina may have been drawn by a Zuni individual around the decade of the 1920s. This detail reminds us that rock art within the same region may have been created at times separated by hundreds or thousands of years. Therefore, each image must be examined according to the rock surface degree of weathering technique, of production, nearby pottery, and archaeological context. Archaeology commonly interprets the human-shaped figures as dancers, spirits, ancestors, or participants in ceremonies. The circles and spirals may relate to the sun's seasonal cycles, migration journeys, water, or movement within the spiritual world. The ancient astronaut hypothesis adds another question. What if the ceremonial masks were originally created to imitate the appearance of visitors who truly appeared? This is the point that makes the Zuni record especially significant. The images do not exist in isolation. They belong to a living culture that continues preserving ceremonies, oral accounts, and a profound relationship with the sky. However, we must also respect the voice of the Zuni people. When a community describes the Katsina as spirits of rain ancestors and nature outsiders, cannot automatically rename them extraterrestrials and regard that as the only explanation. The interpretation of pilots and spacecraft belongs to a modern hypothesis. The religious meaning of the Katsina belongs to Zuni culture itself. Imagine yourself in the position of a person living 800 years ago. The night sky over New Mexico appeared so clear that the Milky Way could extend across the entire horizon. Rain determined the harvest, while observation of the sun determined the proper time for planting. To them, the sky was not a distant and unfamiliar emptiness. It directly governed life. For this reason, beings from the sky may have represented clouds, ancestors, stars, or actual visitors. The carvings remain, but the final explanation depends upon evidence extending beyond their surface appearance. The Zuni record does not prove an extraterrestrial landing, but it shows that Pueblo ancestors regarded the connection between humanity and the sky as a central part of life. And within the interpretation of the ancient astronaut theory, those cliff walls continue to be viewed as a record of the moment when cosmic beings entered human history. The mystery of Val Camonica and the crash of Phaethon's spacecraft. The journey continues by carrying us back to Europe, to the Val Camonica Valley in northern Italy. This is one of the largest collections of rock art ever discovered by humanity. More than 140,000 symbols and human figures have been recorded upon approximately 2,400 rock surfaces. The carving activity continued for more than 8,000 years from prehistoric times through the Roman and medieval periods. The images portray deer hunting, plowing combat dancing houses, carts, and numerous geometric symbols that have not yet been fully deciphered. Within this enormous collection appears a group of figures commonly called the astronauts of Valcamonica, by supporters of the ancient astronaut hypothesis. Look closely at their heads. A circle surrounds the face. Short lines radiate outward like light or cables. Both arms are raised. The body stands in a position that causes modern viewers immediately to think of a person wearing a protective suit. To those who believe in extraterrestrial contact, this is the image of a real astronaut. The circle around the head becomes a sealed helmet. The rays become components of a communication system, or energy emitted from the suit. Archaeology calls many of the figures with raised arms at Valcamonica oranti, meaning human figures praying or performing ceremonies. This shape appears during several periods, and specialists continue debating the dating based upon artistic style and the accompanying symbols. Archaeologists see dancers, warriors, or participants in ceremonies. The ancient astronaut theory sees people wearing suits designed to function within an environment different from the natural conditions of Earth. Beside many carvings appears the famous symbol known as the communion rose. This figure commonly consists of 9 cup-shaped depressions arranged in a particular order and surrounded by a 4-lobed curving line. To date, at least 84 communion roses have been recorded upon 27 rock surfaces. They appear primarily during the Iron Age and are often located near warriors or armed human figures. Some researchers associate the communion rose with the sun's cyclical movement protective power, or an ancient variation of the swastika. Its original meaning has not been determined with certainty because the Comuni system of interpretation has been lost. The ancient astronaut hypothesis presents a completely different reading. According to this interpretation, the 9 depressions are not simple decorative marks. They may represent power sources, balancing points, or engine positions. The surrounding curve depicts a rotating object, while the 4-lobed shape records the movement of a spacecraft observed from below. Ancient people did not understand engines' lift or stabilization systems. They merely recorded what their eyes observed: a circular form, rotating movement, and emitted light. Archaeology has not confirmed that the communion rose represents a flying vehicle. However, the symbol still lacks one definitive explanation, and that incompleteness continues to nourish the debate. Then the story moves toward an even more powerful legend. In northern Italy, the myth of Phaethon tells of the son of the sun god, Helios. Phaethon desired to prove his heavenly origin, so he asked to drive the chariot of the sun for one day. But when the horses departed from their path, the chariot moved too close to the earth, burning the land and threatening the entire world. Zeus was forced to strike the driver with a thunderbolt. The chariot shattered. Phaethon fell from the sky. In the work Metamorphoses, the Roman poet Ovid recounts that Phaethon's burning body fell into the river Eridanus. Later, Roman tradition commonly identified the Eridanus with the Po River in northern Italy. Fragments of the broken chariot are also mentioned by Ovid within the description of the accident. Translate the language of mythology into the language of modern technology. The son of a heavenly being takes control of a luminous machine. The operator loses control. The machine departs from its stable course. Heat radiates downward and burns the ground. A power from above strikes the vehicle. Its components break apart, and the operator falls into northern Italy. According to the interpretation of the ancient astronaut theory, this bears the appearance of an aviation accident report, transmitted through mythological language. The story you are developing also connects the crash with Mount Musine, located near the city of Turin. Within some modern legends and Italian UFO literature, Musine is described as a region containing unusual energy, where Phaethon, or a luminous vehicle, is believed to have crashed. After the accident, Phaethon is described as a figure who taught metallurgy to local people. According to this interpretation, the cosmic machine was forced to make an emergency landing, and the surviving engineers transmitted metalworking techniques to human beings in exchange for shelter materials and assistance. This content creates a very clear scenario. A vehicle experiences an accident. The surviving beings become trapped. They possess technology unknown to the local population. To survive, they begin transmitting skills in metallurgy, observation of the sky, and social organization. But when we return to the surviving ancient sources, we must distinguish between two layers of the story. Ovid truly recounts that Phaethon drove the chariot of the sun, was struck by the lightning of Zeus, and fell into the Eridanus. That river was later associated with the Po. However, the principal surviving Greek and Roman texts do not clearly state that the chariot crashed upon Mount Musine, or that Phaethon survived and personally taught metallurgy. Those details belong to a modern combination of the Phaethon legend, the metalworking culture of northern Italy, and UFO stories surrounding Turin. This does not remove the value of the comparison. It simply places the story in its proper position. The fall of Phaethon is a clearly recorded ancient myth. The connection with the Eridanus and northern Italy appears within classical tradition. The interpretation of the chariot as a spacecraft is an inference of the ancient astronaut theory. Mount Musine and the lesson in metallurgy belong to a layer of local legend and modern interpretation requiring additional historical sources for confirmation. Look again at all three records we have just examined. In Sierra Leone, a mysterious blue material was discovered near a region containing gold and diamonds. In New Mexico, human figures with circular heads and symbols from the sky were carved upon the cliff walls of Pueblo ancestors. At Valcamonica, radiant figures in the Communion Rose appear within a collection of art extending across more than 8,000 years. Beside them, the myth of Phaethon recounts a luminous chariot losing control and falling into northern Italy. Each record standing alone leaves gaps. But when placed beside one another, they create a pattern that demands thought beings from the sky appear bringing luminous vehicles, connecting themselves with metals, and leaving knowledge with humanity. This is the very pattern that the Anunnaki theory seeks to prove. According to this hypothesis, cosmic visitors did not visit only one culture. They traveled across multiple continents, approached different groups of human beings, and left the same traces in various forms. Stone statues, unusual materials, carvings, myths of fiery chariots, and knowledge of metallurgy. All the civilizations of Earth seem to carry a common story concerning teachers who came from the sky. Archaeology explains these similarities through universal human needs. Observing nature, worshiping the sun, using masks, and constructing gods whose forms extended beyond ordinary human beings. The ancient astronaut hypothesis argues that these cultures did not independently create similar motifs. They were recounting the same kind of event through their own languages, symbols, and levels of technology. My viewers, you are standing before that very choice. A circle surrounding the head may be a ceremonial halo. It may also be a helmet. A luminous chariot may represent the sun. It may also be the memory of a flying vehicle. A blue stone may be an artificial material created by human beings. It may also be the remnant of a technology that has not yet been identified. A reliable answer will appear when images, texts, dates, and materials all point in the same direction. Until then, each artifact maintains its position as one piece of the puzzle, compelling, controversial, and unable by itself to bring the investigation to an end. But the next section will take us away from images that may still be explained through ceremony. Because within the ancient cities that come next, the people from the sky do not appear only upon stone. They are named. They are divided into ranks. They are given authority to govern individual lands. And more importantly, the system they established appears to remain in operation within your world today. The Dogon tribe and astronomical knowledge from the Sirius star system. The sky stones of Sierra Leone. The helmeted figures upon the cliffs of New Mexico and the fiery chariot of Phaethon. all leave behind the same question: could ancient people have witnessed beings descending from the sky? But all the previous records still exist, mainly in the form of artifacts and carvings. In Mali, the story moves one step further. Here we encounter a community that continues to preserve rituals, masks, sacred language, and a system of mythology directed straight toward the stars. These are the Dogon people. Let us enter the Bandiagara region of West Africa. Dogon villages cling to sandstone cliffs, rising hundreds of meters, connecting the plateau with the hot, dry plains below. The difficult terrain has helped many communities preserve their identity, architecture, and ceremonial life through many generations. UNESCO currently recognizes this region as a World Heritage Site called the Cliff of Bandiagara Land of the Dogons. One line of tradition repeated by many writers on the Anunnaki and ancient astronauts claims that the ancestors of the Dogon were once nomadic people from Egypt. They were forced to leave the Nile Valley after religious purges, then carried all their theological and astronomical knowledge along with ancient ceremonies toward West Africa. According to this interpretation, the secrets of Egypt did not disappear after the age of the pharaohs. They were transmitted through migrating groups, carried across the desert, and ultimately preserved within the communities living around Bandiagara. The current archaeological record presents a more cautious picture. The precise origin of the Dogon people continues to be studied, but many historical and archaeological traditions connect Dogon groups with migrations from the Mande region and neighboring areas of West Africa. Studies of Dogon art also record Mande origins within several lines of tradition, rather than confirming a direct migration from Egypt. Therefore, the Egyptian connection belongs to a disputed cultural hypothesis. But the cosmological system of the Dogon people is entirely real. And when we enter that system, the story immediately becomes far stranger. Amma Nomo and the rebellion in the sky. Within the mythological system recorded by Marcel Griol and Germain Dieterlen, Amma is the supreme creator. Amma existed before all things and established the structure of the universe, life, and the order among living beings. From Amma emerged primordial beings commonly called the Nomo. The Nomo possess a profound connection with water reproduction, speech order, and rebirth. Within Dogon art, these beings are sometimes portrayed with elongated bodies, amphibious forms, or postures in which both arms reach toward the sky. The British Museum describes one Dogon devotional statue as an image of a female ancestor belonging to the Nomo group, with her arms extended upward, creating a connection between the earth and the sky. Oral accounts say that these primordial beings separated into several different forms. One of them violated the order established by Amma, leading to a crisis that affected the entire world. However, this part must be identified by its correct name. Within the system published by Graulet and Dieterlen, the rebellious figure is commonly called Ogo or Yurugu, rather than a Nomo in the precise sense. Ogo acted before the time permitted by Amma, attempted to complete himself according to his own will, and disrupted the structure of creation. As a consequence, Ogo was transformed into the pale fox, a creature forever moving within a state of incompleteness and restlessness. The Nomo hold a different role. One Nomo was sacrificed, its body was divided, and it was later restored by Amma. The blood and body parts of this being are said to have participated in the purification and reorganization of the world disrupted by the rebellion. This is why some writers describe Amma as destroying the rebellious being and scattering its remains throughout the world. The original story is more complex. Ogo caused the rebellion, while the Nomo passed through sacrifice, dismemberment, and rebirth to restore order. Notice this motif. A heavenly being rebels. The order of the world is broken. Another being undergoes sacrifice. The blood of that being becomes the means of purification and restoration. Similar themes appear within many religious traditions, from the story of fallen angels to gods who are dismembered and then reborn. For the Dogon people, this motif lies at the very center of the way they explain the origin of humanity, death, and the structure of the universe. But the part that particularly interests the ancient astronaut theory lies within the descent of the Nommo to Earth. According to descriptions developed from the work of Grial and Dieterlen, an ark or vehicle carried the first ancestors from the sky down to the Earth. That vehicle brought human beings, seeds, crops, domesticated animals, and the objects necessary to establish life upon the ground. Within some versions, the descent was accompanied by fire thunder, violent motion, and a powerful impact when the vehicle touched the Earth. The Dogon described it through the language of an ark, a granary, or a structure carrying the seeds of life. Modern people look upon the same description and see a spacecraft. A large object descends from the sky. Fire appears beneath it. The air trembles. The vehicle strikes the ground. Beings emerge carrying plant seeds, animals, and knowledge to establish a new community. Replace the words heavenly ark with transport vessel, and the scene immediately takes on the appearance of an organized landing operation. According to the ancient astronaut theory, the fire beneath it was not a religious symbol. It was a jet exhaust used for deceleration. The thunder was not the wrath of the gods. It was the sound produced by a high-powered engine passing through the atmosphere. And the ancestors who stepped down from the ark were a group of settlers from another world. Imagine how a community unfamiliar with rockets would recount that scene. They possessed no concepts of fuel engines or decompression chambers. All they saw was an object from the sky, violent fire, a tremendous sound, and beings who possessed knowledge extending far beyond that of the local community. What would they call those beings? The most natural answer would be gods. However, this remains a modern interpretation. Ethnographic texts describe the heavenly ark within the Dogon mythological system. They do not directly use words such as spacecraft, jet engine, or extraterrestrial planet. Even so, the sequence of details is powerful enough to make the story of the Nommo one of the most important records within the ancient astronaut theory. The 60-year festival in memory transmitted through masks. To this day, the Dogon people continue to conduct recurring ceremonies commemorating their ancestors, the appearance of speech, and the events that established the foundation of their world. The most famous is the Sigui or Sigi, a ceremonial cycle taking place approximately once every 60 years. The festival travels through numerous villages along the Bandiagara cliffs and may continue for several years. The most recent cycle, recorded by the CNRS, began in the year 1967 and continued through the villages until the beginning of the 1970s. According to ethnographic studies, the Sigui commemorates the transmission of speech to humanity, together with the death and funeral of the first ancestor. Participants learn a special ceremonial language, perform dances, drink millet beer, and carry staffs reserved exclusively for this cycle. Within the interpretation of the ancient astronaut theory, the Sigui cycle also serves to commemorate the Nommo and the star system from which that being came. The wooden masks used within Dogon ceremonies become a system of visual storage. Every line records a creature, an ancestor, a natural power, or a stage within the creation story. Look at how a ceremony operates when human beings do not use printed books. One generation creates the mask. The next generation learns its name and meaning. Young people are taught how to dance, how to sing, and when to use each figure. After many centuries, the story continues living within the body, the rhythm of the feet, the sound, and the ceremonial object. The mask therefore functions like a living database. It does not store information through digits like a computer, but uses shape, color, and action to protect memory from interruption. Some Dogon masks may stand several meters tall. The great mask associated with the Sigui is kept within a sacred place, while the remains of earlier cycles are sometimes preserved within caves. The Penn Museum records a tradition concerning a large mask, approximately 18 feet long, kept inside a secret cave, whose location is known only to the elders. For the Dogon people, these are ceremonial objects associated with ancestors' death and the restoration of the community. For the ancient astronaut theory, they may represent an attempt to reproduce the appearance of beings who once stepped down from the ark in the sky. Some Dogon statues portray figures with elongated bodies, narrow heads and arms reaching upward or surrounding the space before them. Some writers refer to one representative figure as Amma, holding the entire universe within his arms. This interpretation is immediately placed beside Pharaoh Akhenaten of Egypt. Art from the Amarna period commonly portrays Akhenaten and members of the royal family with elongated faces, projecting chins, narrow eyes, slender necks, and visibly extended skulls. These features created an appearance completely different from earlier Egyptian royal art. Museums identify this as a characteristic of Amarna art, a new style developed during the period of Akhenaten's religious reforms. The ancient astronaut theory sees something else. Its supporters place Dogon statues beside portraits of Akhenaten and argue that both cultures were recording the same type of being: an elongated head, a slender body, and a special connection with the sky. The distance between Mali and Egypt extends for thousands of miles. The distance in time is also immense. But if the tradition of migration from Egypt contains some part of the truth, these similarities may reflect a system of symbols carried through many generations. Archaeology views the appearance of Akhenaten primarily as an artistic style and a religious symbol. The extraterrestrial hypothesis views it as the anatomical image of a being different from humanity. The direct connection between Dogon statues and Akhenaten has not yet been demonstrated through an uninterrupted chain of artifacts, texts, or genetic evidence. Even so, the question remains: why did both cultures give a central position to beings with unusual forms who were closely connected with the order of the sky? The most controversial answer lies within the brightest star in the night sky, the terrifying secret of the star Sirius B. During the 1930s, the French anthropologist Marcel Griaule began studying the life and ceremonies of the Dogon people. Germain Dieterlen later joined him, continued the fieldwork, and worked with him to construct one of the most controversial ethnographic records of the 20th century. The research directly concerning the Sirius star system was conducted mainly from the year 1946 to the year 1950. Within an article published in the year 1950, Griaule and Dieterlen stated that they had gathered information from 4 Dogon individuals who held important religious positions, while also saying that the central parts of the system appeared within several neighboring communities. The priests are said to have shared with the 2 researchers a system of esoteric knowledge concerning the sky. The most prominent part of that system was the story of Potolo. Griaule and Dieterlen connected this name with a small, extremely heavy, and almost invisible star moving around Sirius along an orbit lasting approximately 50 years. They identified Potolo as Sirius B, the companion star of Sirius A. At this exact point, the Dogon story became a global mystery. Sirius A is the brightest star in the night sky. It lies within the constellation Canis Major and can be seen with the naked eye from many regions of the Earth. Sirius B is completely different. It is a white dwarf, approximately the size of the Earth, but possessing a mass close to that of the Sun. From our position, it appears extremely close to Sirius A, while remaining thousands of times dimmer than the primary star. The powerful light of Sirius A easily conceals this small companion. The Sirius system lies approximately 8.6 light-years from Earth, while Sirius B completes one orbit in approximately 50.13 years. Imagine an extremely bright headlight shining directly into your eyes. Immediately beside it is a point of light thousands of times dimmer. That small light still exists, but the brightness of the larger lamp makes it almost impossible for you to see. That is the very difficulty involved in observing Sirius B. However, the scientific timeline must be stated with complete accuracy. The astronomer Friedrich Bessel recognized the unusual movement of Sirius and predicted the existence of an invisible companion object in the year 1844. In the year 1862, Alvin Graham Clark directly observed Sirius B while testing a new refracting telescope. Therefore, science discovered this star during the 19th century, rather than waiting until the 1970s. Clearer photographs and more detailed measurements continued appearing throughout the 20th century, then advanced greatly through the Hubble Space Telescope and modern observation systems. But Sirius B had been seen through a telescope since the year 1862. This changes the central focus of the mystery. The main question is no longer, how did the Dogon know all of this before Western science? The more accurate question is, how long had the system of knowledge recorded by Griol and Dieterlen existed within Dogon culture, and through what path did it enter the community? According to the report published in the year 1950, the Dogon described Potolo as an object that was small, but possessed tremendous weight. It moved around the primary star in a cycle close to 50 years, remarkably similar to the actual orbit of Sirius B. If this knowledge existed before the Dogon came into contact with European astronomy, it would be an exceptionally difficult fact to explain. A community that did not use telescopes knew that Sirius possessed a companion star. They understood that the object was very small. They knew it was extraordinarily heavy, and they connected it with a cycle of approximately 50 years. For supporters of the ancient astronaut theory, the answer lies directly within the mythology of the Namo. Beings from the Sirius system personally transmitted knowledge of their home to the ancestors of the Dogon. Potolo was more than a star. It was the point of origin of the teachers who once descended to Earth within a luminous vehicle. From this perspective, the Sigui was held approximately once every 60 years to commemorate the astronomical cycle and the return of visitors from the sky. But the ethnographic record contains one major problem. In the year 1991, the anthropologist Walter van Beek published the results of many years of field research within the Dogon region. He stated that he had been unable to reconfirm the complex astronomical system previously described by Griol and Dieterlen. Many Dogon people whom he interviewed did not give Sirius or the Namo the prominent position found within the model that had become famous in the West. Some people recognized the name Sigu Tolo, but offered different identifications. Some regarded it as an invisible star, announcing the approach of the Sigui ceremony. Others associated it with a different celestial body, even with Venus. Van Beek argued that Griol may have combined separate fragments of mythology into a system more unified than the one that truly existed within Dogon life. Scholars who defend Griol present another possibility. Esoteric knowledge belonged only to a small group of priests, so a researcher arriving several decades later may not have reached the correct people. The development of Islam, Christianity, modern education, and tourism may also have changed the structure through which secret knowledge was transmitted within the community. A more practical possibility involves cultural contact. Sirius B had been discovered by European science in the year 1862. Before Griol began his central interviews during the late 1940s, Mali had experienced many decades of French rule. Missionaries, officers, teachers, travelers, and astronomical expeditions could easily have carried knowledge of Sirius into the region. That information may then have blended with indigenous traditions and later been recounted as part of an ancient system. This commonly occurs within oral cultures. A living story continually receives new details, arranges them within familiar symbols, and transmits them to later generations without leaving a clear marker identifying the moment of change. You do something similar every day. You hear a story from your parents. You receive additional knowledge from books, television, and the internet. After many years, these sources blend together until even you may find it difficult to remember which detail appeared first. For this reason, the Dogon record does not provide a simple conclusion. Griol and Dieterlen truly published a Sirius system in the year 1950. Sirius B truly is a small, extremely dense white dwarf with an orbital period of approximately 50 years. The Dogon people truly preserved the Sigui ceremony, according to a long cycle close to the length of a human lifetime. But whether the Sirius knowledge existed for many centuries or entered Dogon culture through modern contact remains a matter of debate. And this is precisely what allows the story to continue exerting such powerful attraction. If Griol accurately recorded an ancient secret tradition, the Dogon possessed knowledge of an invisible star their ancestors could not have observed directly. If Van Beek is correct, We are witnessing the way a mythological system was shaped through interaction between a researcher and an indigenous community. Both possibilities reveal that human memory is far more complex than a fixed record. But for the Anunnaki hypothesis, the sequence of facts is sufficient to form one bold conclusion. Visitors from the Sirius system once landed in West Africa, transmitted astronomical knowledge to the Dogon, and left the memory of their descent within the story of the Namo. My viewers look again at the pattern gradually appearing before us. In Sierra Leone, people discovered Namoli statues and sky stones near a region rich in gold and diamonds. In Mali, the Dogon tell of the Namo, the arc from the sky, and a star system containing a small but extraordinarily heavy object. In Egypt, Sirius held a special position within the calendar religion and the flooding cycle of the Nile River. 3 regions lie upon the same continent. All 3 traditions point toward the sky, and all 3 connect human knowledge with higher beings. Archaeology sees networks of cultural exchange beliefs concerning ancestors and a process of observing the sky that continued for thousands of years. The ancient astronaut theory sees a route traveled by the same group of extraterrestrial beings. The Dogon do not yet represent final proof of contact with Sirius B, but they place before us a question large enough for the investigation to continue. If the Namo are truly only mythology, why does the story describe a vehicle descending amid fire and thunder, while also connecting it with a small, heavy, and invisible star orbiting Sirius? And if those visitors once came to Earth, was their purpose limited to transmitting knowledge? Or are the Dogon preserving part of the memory of the same force that once extracted gold, intervened in the origin of humanity, and established the first systems of power upon this planet? When Kingship descended from heaven. If the stories of the Dogon people truly preserve the memory of a group of beings who once stepped down from the sky, the next question becomes difficult to avoid. After passing down their knowledge, did they leave the Earth? Or did they begin organizing the way human beings lived and served? To find the answer, we must return to the place where the investigation began, the plains of Mesopotamia. Human beings can build houses, dig canals, grow barley, and raise livestock by themselves. A community large enough can also choose its own leader to protect the harvest, distribute water, and settle disputes. So why does one of the most important political texts of the ancient world affirm that rulership did not begin with humanity? It came from heaven. That declaration appears in the opening lines of a document commonly known as the Sumerian King List. The most famous complete copy is currently preserved at the Ashmolean Museum of the University of Oxford. It was written upon a 4-sided clay prism, with each side divided into 2 columns of cuneiform writing. The artifact dates to approximately 1800 before Christ and was most likely discovered in the region of Larsa in what is now southern Iraq. This is not a record created during the time of the Great Flood, but a later copy-gathering traditions that had been passed down through many earlier generations. The list begins with an extremely brief statement. After Kingship descended from heaven, Kingship was established at Eridu. In Sumerian, this concept is called Namlugal Kingship Royal Status, or the authority to rule. The text uses a phrase indicating that this power descended from heaven and was then placed within a specific city. The first person to receive it was Alulim, the king of Eridu. He is recorded as ruling for 28,800 years. His successor, named Alalgar, continued sitting upon the throne for 36,000 years. The first 2 kings alone ruled for a combined total of 64,800 years. Pause for a moment and think about that number. The clearly recorded history of many modern nations extends for only several hundred or several thousand years. A human lifetime today commonly does not reach 100 years. Yet the first king of Eridu, is described as having sat upon the throne for nearly 30,000 years. After Alulim and Alalgar, kingship departed from Eridu and was transferred to Bad Tibira. There Enmenluana ruled for 43,200 years. Enmengal-Ana reigned for 28,800 years. Dumuzid, whom the text calls a shepherd king, held power for 36,000 years. Kingship then continued through Larak Sipar and finally Shurapak. At Shurapak, Ubaratutu ruled for 18,600 years. Altogether, 8 kings in 5 cities held power for 241,200 years. Then the text abruptly closes that age with a single sentence. After that, the great flood swept over the land. There is no long explanation. No scene of war between kingdoms. No popular uprising appears to overthrow the king. A massive flood arrives, and the entire former order comes to an end. But something even more remarkable occurs immediately afterward. When the waters recede, the Sumerian king list repeats the opening statement almost exactly. After the great flood had swept over the land and kingship once again descended from heaven, kingship was established at Kish. Kingship was not created by the survivors after the disaster. It was brought down from heaven again, just as it had been the first time. The city changed. The kings changed. The lifespans of the rulers gradually became closer to those of human beings. But the origin of power remained unchanged. Heaven determined where kingship would reside. This is the detail that makes the Sumerian king list one of the most fascinating documents for the Anunnaki hypothesis. The text does more than name the people who once ruled. It describes kingship as an object or function that can be bestowed, withdrawn, and transferred from one city to another. You can imagine it like the operating license of a corporation. Local directors may change, and the central office may move to a new city, but the actual authority to operate still comes from a higher level. The person sitting inside the palace does not possess power by himself. He has been authorized to manage one part of the system. The Sumerians also did not present the cities as equal kingdoms existing side by side and competing freely. The list arranges them into a continuous sequence. At any given time, one city was regarded as holding the turn to rule appointed by the gods. When that city weakened or failed, kingship was transferred elsewhere. Researchers refer to this concept of a turn of rulership by the Sumerian word Bala. The list idealizes history as though dominion over the entire Mesopotamian region belonged to only one city at a time, even though archaeology shows that many city-states existed simultaneously. The later kings of Eson may have used this structure to place themselves at the end of a sacred chain of succession, thereby declaring that their authority was the lawful continuation of all the history that came before. Put more simply, the Sumerian king list is both a historical memory and something resembling a record created to legitimize power. A new king did not need to prove that he was the strongest in every battle. He only needed to persuade the people that the gods had transferred rulership to his city. Once that belief was accepted, obedience to the king also became part of obedience to the order of the universe. That is a form of control more powerful than the whip. A whip can force a person to work, while a soldier stands beside him. Belief in heavenly authority causes that same person to accept his position even when no one is watching. He believes that the city, the king, the fields, and the social order have all been arranged by the gods. Today you vote, sign contracts, pay taxes, and live under a legal system openly created by human beings. You can read a constitution, know the name of the institution that passes laws, and even question the person in power. But in Sumer, most people were raised within an entirely different world. Rulership came from a level higher than humanity itself. The king served as the chosen administrator, while the will of the gods stood behind the throne. So how should the reigns lasting tens of thousands of years be understood? The first interpretation, and the one most common among scholars, holds that the opening section of the Sumerian king list belongs to a mythological age. The kings before the Great Flood stand at the boundary among God's heroes and human beings. Their enormous reigns help the listener sense that this was an ancient world in which time, lifespan, and the order of the universe were still different from the present age. We still use a similar form of storytelling in modern life. When we say that a figure belongs to the beginning of time or the age of the gods, listeners understand that the story has moved beyond ordinary chronology. The Sumerians used extremely large numbers to create that distance. The Ashmolean Museum itself describes the Sumerian king list as a combination of mythology, legend, and historical information. As the list moves toward rulers who can be compared with other sources, the lengths of their reigns also become more realistic. This suggests that the writers combined mythological memory of the primordial age with political history closer to their own period. The second interpretation focuses upon the Sumerian mathematical system. We are accustomed to counting in base 10, largely because we possess 10 fingers. The Sumerians, however, developed a system of calculation strongly based upon the number 60. Its traces remain upon your wrist. Every time you look at a watch, 60 seconds form 1 minute and 60 minutes form 1 hour. A circle is also divided into 360 degrees. Look again at the reigns before the Great Flood. 28,000, 836,000, 43,000, 221,000, and 18,600 are all divisible by 60. The total period of 241,200 years also belongs to the same numerical system. This leads many researchers to believe that the numbers carried mathematical and symbolic structures, rather than functioning as records of biological lifespans in the way we understand them today. The scribes may have used large units, sacred multiples, or numerical patterns to express the position of each king within the primordial age. The precise origin of the base 60 system continues to be studied, but its role within Mesopotamian mathematics has been clearly documented. However, that explanation opens a new question. Even if the numbers carried symbolic meaning, why did the Sumerians choose to describe the first rulers through lifespans extending so far beyond those of ordinary human beings? Why did Alulim not reign for 40 years, 60 years, or even 100 years, but for 28,800 years? The ancient astronaut hypothesis offers a third interpretation. According to this view, the kings before the Great Flood did not belong entirely to modern humanity. They may have been members of a long-lived species hybrid beings between gods and human beings, or administrators placed by the Anunnaki at individual centers of government upon the earth. A being from another world could possess a life cycle completely different from ours. A year upon their planet might also have a different length from a year upon the earth. Within this interpretation, the enormous reigns are not exaggerations produced by ancient scribes. They are remnants of a system of time or longevity that later human beings lost the ability to explain. This is an inference of the Anunnaki hypothesis, because the Sumerian king list does not say that Alulim descended from a spacecraft, carried extraterrestrial DNA, or lived upon the planet Nibiru. The text states only that Kingship descended from heaven. Alulim became king, and he ruled for 28,800 years. But another Sumerian source makes this first king even more noteworthy. A version belonging to the Sumerian Great Flood tradition, reconstructed from fragments found at Ur, reveals that Alulim was appointed by the gods as the first king. The text also connects him with the image of the king as the shepherd of the people, an image that later appeared frequently within Mesopotamian royal ideology. This detail shows that Alulim did not simply gather people around himself and declare that he was king. His status was granted by a higher council. He was placed in the position of ruler, like an administrator assigned to care for and direct a herd of livestock. The image of the shepherd sounds gentle. A shepherd protects the flock from predators, leads it to water, and finds pasture so that it can survive. But the shepherd also decides where the flock goes, when it eats, how it reproduces, and which animal will be taken away. When the king is called the shepherd of the people, that image contains both protection and control. Remember the story of Apparatus. The lower-ranking gods rebelled because of the burden of labor. Human beings were created to take over the work. If that story reflects an ancient system of management, the new workforce would require organizers. Thousands of workers could not dig canals, build cities, distribute food, and transport materials according to one unified plan entirely by themselves. They needed commanders, and those commanders had to answer to the ones who gave them their assignments. From this perspective, the birth of kingship is the completely logical next step following the creation of humanity. First, a laboring species was formed. Next, knowledge and tools were given to them. Then, administrators were appointed to gather the people into cities, divide the work, and maintain order. The king stood between two worlds. Above him were the gods. Below him were the people. He received power from above and transmitted commands downward. Within the Mesopotamian divine system, the sky god, An or Anu, in Akkadian, held the position of supreme authority. Texts describe An as the god who could assign functions to other gods and grant kingship upon the earth. His decisions were regarded as difficult to change. Meanwhile, Anuna, the Sumerian name, corresponding to Anunnaki in Akkadian, was used for a group of major gods whose important functions included determining fate. Some texts even mention the 50 Anuna of Eridu. This does not mean that the Sumerian king list directly states that all 8 kings were sent down by the Anunnaki. The text does not name the council responsible for granting kingship within every line, but within the broader Mesopotamian worldview, the authority to determine fate, function, and status rested in the hands of the major gods. Eridu was also not a random location. This city was associated with Enki, the god of subterranean fresh water, wisdom, skill, and creation. Within traditions concerning the creation of humanity, Enki held the role of discovering the solution that freed the gods from labor. He participated in forming the workforce that would assume that burden. And within the Sumerian king list, Eridu became the first place to receive kingship from heaven. The two stories stand very close together. Enki is associated with the decision to create human beings, etched human beings to take over labor. The city of Enki becomes the first place to receive kingship. The first king is appointed by the gods to shepherd the people. For scholars, these are parts of the Mesopotamian theological and political system. They explain the origin of society through the language of the gods. For the Anunnaki hypothesis, they resemble consecutive stages within a project designed to manage humanity. That project would not require an Anunnaki to stand beside every worker. An efficient system always operates through multiple levels. Those at the top establish the objective. Lower-level managers divide the assignments. Scribes record production. Supervisors maintain progress. And the workforce knows only the particular duty assigned to it each day. You may be living more than 4,000 years after Sumer, but that structure remains highly familiar. Within a large corporation, most employees never meet the true owner. They receive assignments from team leaders. The team leaders receive targets from management, and the executive board answers to a group of shareholders located far from the place where the work occurs. The owner does not need to be present in the room. Their power remains present within every command. That may be how we should interpret the statement kingship descended from heaven. We do not necessarily need to imagine a metal crown falling from the clouds into the hands of Alulim. What descended was authority, the right to command, organize labor, mobilize resources, and determine who must obey whom. When that authority was regarded as a gift from the gods, the people found it very difficult to question. A weak king could be replaced. A city could collapse. But the system of kingship itself remained protected, because people believed that its origin lay beyond humanity. The Great Flood swept away the first 8 kings. 5 cities lost their power. An age lasting 241,200 years came to an end. Yet immediately after the disaster, kingship descended again and began at Kish. That is the most important secret of the list. Rulers may die. Cities may be destroyed. An entire civilization may be erased from the earth by floodwaters. But the mechanism that grants authority from heaven to a group of rulers survives. It is installed again. Within the academic interpretation, the Sumerian king list helped later dynasties legitimize their status by connecting them with a sacred line of power extending back before the Great Flood. Within the interpretation of the Anunnaki hypothesis, It may preserve traces of a model of government established by advanced beings and maintained throughout many ages. The two interpretations differ concerning the identity of those who stood behind the system, but they meet. At one point, the Sumerian people were taught that rulership did not belong to humanity as a whole. It was granted to a chosen few, and once society accepted that idea, the Anunnaki did not need to sit directly upon the throne. They only needed to decide who was permitted to sit there. Each Sumerian city belonged to a god. The Anunnaki did not need to stand directly upon the throne. They only needed to decide who was permitted to sit upon it. But that statement immediately leads us to an even more important question. If the king was merely the person who received authority, then who was the true owner of the city? For the Sumerians, the answer was very clear. It was the patron god of the city. Today, when we speak of a city, we commonly think of the people living there. Land belongs to individuals, businesses, or the state. Local governments administer roads, taxation, and public services. The leader of the city is regarded as a temporary administrator, while ultimate ownership is determined through human law. In Sumer, that understanding was completely different. According to the official ideology transmitted by Mesopotamian kings and court poets, the city-state was the property of its patron god. The king received authority from the god to bring order, prosperity, and stability to the land. The temple was regarded as the house of the god, while the palace was the residence of the person who administered the human world on behalf of that god. Put in ordinary terms, the people lived within the city, but the god was its owner. The king did not completely own the fields, canals, livestock, or labor force. He held the position of the person entrusted with protecting, expanding, and administering assets belonging to a heavenly power. This is precisely why every major city-state in Sumer was associated with a particular god. Eridu belonged to Enki, the god of subterranean freshwater wisdom, skill, and the achievements of civilization. His principal temple was called Abzu, meaning House of the Abzu, and was constructed at the center of the city. Ur belonged to the moon god, Nana. Uruk was closely associated with Inanna, the goddess of love, warfare, and power. Nippur was the city of Enlil, the supreme god who possessed the authority to determine destiny and grant kingship. Meanwhile, Girsu served as the sacred center of Ningirsu, the warrior god and protector of the city-state of Lagash. These gods did not merely appear within prayers. They held a position resembling the legal owners of the cities. When the Sumerians said that Enki resided in Eridu, they were not merely expressing an abstract belief that his power was present there. The Abzu temple was regarded as the actual residence of Enki within the religious order. When the people of Ur brought offerings to the temple of Nana, they were providing food and property to the heavenly owner of the land. When a king traveled to Nippur to rebuild the Ikur, he was serving Enlil, the god who held the authority to confirm or withdraw the legitimacy of kingship. Imagine a city as an enormous estate. At its very center stands the house of the owner. Surrounding that house stretch barley fields, orchards, herds of livestock, storehouses, workshops, and residential areas for the laborers. The owner rarely appears before everyone. Instead, he has property administrators, supervisors, scribes, priests, and a workforce operating the entire estate. That is the closest image to help us understand a Sumerian city-state. The temple was not merely a place people visited to pray several times each year. It was a large institution that owned or administered land, livestock, food storehouses, laborers, and numerous forms of production. Temples and palaces controlled much of the economic and political life of many Mesopotamian cities, although the degree of influence changed according to each period and locality. Studies of the city of Ur during its early period reveal that the sacred district of the god Nana administered a large landed estate, its own personnel, and a multi-layered administrative system. At Oma, during the Third Dynasty of Ur, administrative tablets recorded rations of barley and bread distributed to female workers and their children who belonged to various temples. Other documents list plowmen, harrowers, supervisors, scribes, and laborers working upon fields managed by large institutions. This does not mean that every piece of land in Sumer belonged to the temple. Early texts also show that houses, fields, and livestock could be bought, sold, or held by individuals. A tablet dating to approximately 2900 to 2700 before Christ records a transaction involving 3 fields, 3 houses, and several animals. This very record shows that private ownership existed, although a significant portion of the land was still regarded as the property of the gods and administered by the temples. When we say that a city belonged to a god, we are speaking about the foundational ideology of society and the scale of temple power, rather than claiming that every jar house and garden stood beneath one single form of ownership. But for ordinary people, that distinction sometimes changed very little within daily life. You still had to bring produce into the storehouse. You still had to fulfill labor obligations. Your family still depended upon distributed rations. And all these activities took place in the name of an order established by the gods. Sumerian economic systems during the 3rd millennium before Christ are commonly described by scholars according to a redistributive model. Land and labor produced an amount of goods exceeding immediate household needs. The surplus was brought into the storehouses of the temple palace or state, then used to provide rations for laborers, maintain the administrative system, perform offerings, finance trade, and fulfill taxation obligations. Most of the surviving cuneiform tablets from this period are administrative records belonging to these very accounting systems. In other words, the people produced, the central institution collected, the scribes recorded. The products were then distributed again according to each person's position, work, and status. Remember the story of apparatuses. Human beings were created to carry the work of the gods. At this point, we begin to see how that idea moved out of mythology and entered actual life. One group worked the fields, another dug canals, another tended livestock, another produced beer-wove textiles, manufactured tools, or transported goods. Above them stood supervisors and scribes. Above those were priests, officials, and the king. And at the highest point of the entire system stood the god of the city. It was the god who determined the meaning of labor. The farmer did not merely cultivate barley to feed his family. A portion of his produce served the temple, the ceremonies, and the sacred order. The craftsman did not merely create objects for exchange within the marketplace. His labor could be mobilized for temple projects, palace projects, or large administrative institutions. When labor was placed beneath the name of the divine, it carried a special psychological power. You could oppose a greedy administrator. You could become angry with a cruel king. But opposing the patron god of your own city was an entirely different choice. The god controlled rainwater crops, war, reproduction, and destiny. Serving the system, therefore, became part of maintaining the order of the universe. If offerings stopped arriving, the gods could become angry. If the temple was neglected, the city could lose its protection. If the king failed to build or repair the residence of the god, the crops, the army, and the entire community could suffer the consequences. This was not an employment contract in the way we understand one today. It was an obligation of existence. The people worked so that the city could continue living. The city existed through the protection of the god. And the king had to prove that he was faithfully serving the heavenly owner. For this reason, one of the most important duties of Mesopotamian kings was to construct, repair, and expand temples. When King Ur-Nammu reunified much of southern Mesopotamia near the end of the 3rd millennium before Christ, he did not merely build palaces for himself. He invested heavily in structures belonging to the gods, including the Akur at Nippur and the Ziggurat of Nanaat. Bricks bearing the king's name were buried within the foundations, like a declaration sent to the gods and later generations that he had fulfilled his duty. Rulers from many different cities also traveled to Nippur to present offerings and repair the Ikur, because Enlil was regarded as the god who granted kingship. A king might control a powerful army, possess storehouses filled with grain, and govern many territories, but he still required the sacred recognition of Enlil. in order to present that power as part of the lawful order. Look closely at the mechanism operating here. The king builds a house for the god. The god grants kingship to the king. The king uses that power to mobilize the people to build produce and fight. Then the results are offered back to the god. The circle closes. The people at the bottom create the wealth. The king stands in the middle and organizes its flow. The god at the top provides the reason the entire system is regarded as sacred and necessary. Within the Anunnaki hypothesis, this is the point where the story becomes especially remarkable. If the gods were only religious symbols, we are looking at the way ancient society used belief to organize the economy and legitimize power. But if the Anunnaki were once real beings, the Sumerian cities may have operated as administrative territories assigned to individual members of a higher ruling class. Enki administered Eridu. Enlil held Nippur. Inanna was associated with Uruk. Nana owned Ur. Ningirsu protected Girsu and Lagash. Each god possessed a city, a temple, a priesthood land offerings, and a personal labor system. Sumerian texts could even speak of the Anunna, belonging to particular cities or city-states, such as the Anunna of Eridu and the Anunna of Lagash. The group of gods called the Anunna, corresponding to the Anunnaki in Akkadian, held an important role in determining fate. According to the ancient astronaut interpretation, this resembles a system of territorial division. A powerful force arrives upon the Earth. They divide strategic regions among themselves. Each member becomes responsible for one population center. They appoint representatives to govern construct administrative facilities, organize labor, and concentrate resources. The temples become headquarters. The king becomes the local administrator. The priests serve as transmitters of commands, and the scribes operate the data system. This is the reasoning of the Anunnaki hypothesis. The ancient texts do not say that the cities were extraterrestrial mining bases, do not call the temples administrative headquarters for astronauts, and do not confirm that the gods governed the Earth through modern technology. But the structure described by the texts was entirely real. A city was associated with a god. The god possessed a house and property. The king received authority from the god. The people labored within an order organized by the king, the palace, and the temple. One of the clearest records comes from the city-state of Lagash near the end of the 3rd millennium before Christ. There, the famous ruler Gudea devoted much of his public image to serving the gods. Rather than primarily depicting himself as a warrior crushing his enemies, Gudea commonly appeared in a calm posture with his hands clasped, wearing simple clothing and demonstrating devotion to his responsibility of building temples. Inscriptions upon statues and votive objects call Ningirsu his lord, while also recording Gudea's construction of the Eninu temple for this god. A metal foundation peg at the British Museum even bears the name of Ningirsu, the divine owner of the temple, together with the seal of Gudea, the person responsible for carrying out the project. That detail deserves our consideration. The name of the god identifies the owner of the structure. The name of the king identifies the person who built it. Gudea controlled the resources of a city-state. Mobilized laborers brought materials from distant lands to Girsu and organized an enormous construction project. But when the structure was completed, he did not declare that the Eninu was his private property. He presented it to Ningirsu. The king was the builder. The god was the recipient. An inscription of King Enmetena at Lagash also describes him as the person chosen within the heart of the goddess Nanshe and as the chief administrator of Ningirsu. The term for a city ruler, commonly transliterated as Ensi, could later carry the meaning of governor or viceroy of a god. This helps us understand the position of the king more clearly. He was not an absolute owner standing above every power. He was the representative at the lower level. Some rulers used the title Lugal, commonly translated as king. Others used Ensi, referring to a city ruler or governor. The meanings and status of these titles changed according to the period. But within religious thought, even a powerful king commonly presented himself as the person chosen by the god, the shepherd of the people, and the builder of the god's house. Traces of this idea continued within later Mesopotamian civilizations. In the city of Ashur, during the early 2nd millennium before Christ, rulers did not use the title of king in the ordinary manner, but called themselves governors, thereby emphasizing their position as the leading servants of the god Ashur, the deity who shared the name of the city. Put more simply, the king may have been the most powerful person the people could see, but he still had a superior. Try placing that structure within modern life. A resort manager may live within the finest house on the property. He possesses the authority to hire employees, allocate budgets, sign contracts, and require everyone to carry out their work. To an ordinary employee, the manager appears to possess nearly all the power within that region. But the resort still belongs to someone else. The owner may live thousands of miles away. He rarely appears before the employees, does not personally inspect every room, and does not directly answer every question. However, the entire system still operates for his benefit and according to his objectives. The manager does not own the property. He only administers it. Within the Sumerian world, the king held a similar position. He ruled the city, but the city belonged to the god. He administered the fields, but the fertility of the land was regarded as a gift from the god. He mobilized the army, but victory required the god's protection. He issued commands, but his legitimacy originated from the authority that had descended from heaven. And the most remarkable point is that the people also knew this. They were not merely serving the king. Through the king, they were serving the god of the city. This idea enabled power to extend beyond the limits of a single human lifetime. One king died, and his successor rose. One dynasty ended, and another appeared. But the god remained. The temple continued standing at the center. The field's grain storehouses, ceremonies, and labor system continued operating under the name of the same heavenly owner. The king could change. The true owner remained the same. This was an important development beyond the image of the gods directly performing labor within apparatuses. At the beginning of the story, the gods dug canals and carried earth themselves. After the rebellion, human beings were created to take over the work. But a large labor force required organizers, storehouses, quotas, laws, and systems of supervision. Kingship solved the problem of command. The city-state solved the problem of concentrating the population. The temple solved the problem of ownership and distribution. The priesthood solved the problem of communicating the will of the god. The scribes solved the problem of record-keeping. Each new layer made it less necessary for the gods to appear directly. That is how a system of power matures. A primitive ruler must stand beside the workers and continually issue commands. A complete system causes workers to know for themselves when they must arrive, which task they must perform, which product they must deliver, and whom they must obey. Within such a system, the owner may even disappear from sight. His name remains upon the temple. His symbol continues to be carried within the ceremonies. His representative continues to sit upon the throne. Property continues flowing into the storehouses, and the labor force continues awakening each morning to keep the entire structure operating. You live within a world very different from Sumer. You can own property, change jobs, question the government, and choose your beliefs. But much of your day still takes place inside organizations larger than yourself. Every organization possesses owners' levels of management, data systems, regulations, and objectives that you can see only in part. You regularly interact with managers. You rarely meet the person standing at the highest point. For the Sumerians, the distance was even greater. The administrator they could see was the king. The superior above the king resided within the temple and belonged to the divine realm. This is not evidence confirming that the Anunnaki truly divided the cities of Earth among themselves, but it reveals one very clear historical truth. The first cities of Sumer were organized within a worldview in which ultimate ownership belonged to the gods, while rulers received the duty of administering the land on their behalf. And if the Anunnaki hypothesis is correct, this was the perfect model of control. Those standing above did not need to walk through every field. They did not need to enter every workshop. Nor did they need to issue commands directly to every laborer. They only needed to own the city, place a loyal person upon the throne, build a temple at the center, then cause the entire population to believe that serving the system was the same as serving the order of the universe. But an enormous city could not operate through belief alone. The king needed to know how much barley remained within the storehouses. The temple needed to know which person had completed the work. The supervisor needed to know how many rations each laborer should receive. And the owner needed to know exactly how much property was flowing toward the center. That was when one of humanity's greatest inventions appeared: writing. The first symbols were not created to tell love stories, record prayers, or preserve philosophy. They were created to count property. And the next secret will take us inside the Sumerian temple, where the altar, the grain storehouse, the production workshops, and the clay tablets began combining into what may be regarded as the first great economic organization in human history. An organization operating in the name of a god, but sustained by human labor. The early temple and the first administrative apparatus. If every Sumerian city truly belonged to a god, and the king was only the administrator acting on behalf of that god, then how was the city's enormous amount of property managed? Who counted the barley that had just been brought into the storehouse? Who recorded the sheep that belonged to the temple? Who knew whether a worker had completed the required number of days? And how could an organization keep track of thousands of human beings while they were digging canals, plowing fields, brewing beer, weaving cloth, and transporting goods across vast territory? The answer leads us to one of the greatest turning points in human history: writing. Today we often think writing came into existence because human beings wanted to preserve prayers, recount wars, or record profound thoughts about life. But the earliest clay tablets excavated in Mesopotamia tell a far more practical story. The first symbols did not focus upon love, death, or the meaning of the universe. They recorded goods, they counted barley, they tracked livestock, and they distributed rations to laborers. Near the end of the 4th millennium, before Christ, Uruk had developed into an enormous urban center in southern Mesopotamia. By approximately 3,200 before Christ, it may have been the largest settlement in the region, with massive mud brick structures, ceremonial districts, production workshops, and a population far greater than those of ordinary agricultural villages. That scale created a problem that human memory could no longer solve by itself. Too many people, too many products, and too many obligations needed to be tracked at the same time. A small family could remember how many sacks of grain remained in the storehouse. A shepherd could recognize each animal within his own flock. But when an organization managed hundreds of fields, numerous herds of livestock, teams of craftsmen, and thousands of food rations, spoken words began to lose their effectiveness. An administrator could not rely upon memory to determine who had delivered 20 baskets of grain, who owed 3 goats, and which storehouse had just received a large quantity of barley. The system needed a memory located outside the human mind. Clay became that memory. Before fully developed cuneiform appeared, the inhabitants of the Near East used geometric counting tokens, seals, and various other methods to verify goods. As cities developed, these tools were gradually combined with numerical marks and drawings upon clay, around 3,300 before Christ. Early written tablets began to appear clearly at Uruk. The first drawings are commonly called proto-cuneiform because they still retain the appearance of the objects being depicted before gradually becoming more abstract, wedge-shaped marks. Imagine a scribe sitting within a room near the temple's grain storehouse. Before him lies a lump of soft clay. A supervisor enters and reports that a laboring team has just received barley bread and beer. The scribe uses the tip of a reed to create marks indicating quantity, then adds symbols for the type of goods and the recipient. When the clay dries, that information survives longer than the memories of everyone within the room. The administrator may change. The laborers may leave, but the clay tablet preserves the number unchanged. The British Museum currently preserves a clay tablet from the late Uruk period, dating to approximately 3,300 to 3,100 before Christ. Upon it appears the image of a human head facing a triangular object. Within the later system of signs, the human head together with that object formed the concept of eating, while the triangle represented bread. Researchers identify this form of symbol as commonly appearing within documents related to rations. The clay tablet did not need to write a complete sentence like modern language. It needed to answer only one question: who was permitted to eat and how much were they to receive? That represented a change far greater than its appearance suggested. Before that moment, food distribution took place through spoken agreements, customs, or direct relationships within the community. When rations were recorded as marks upon clay, access to food began to depend upon records. A person could say that he had worked the full 5 days, but the clay tablet could present a different number. A family could claim that they still lacked barley, but the keeper of the storehouse would look at the record before opening the door. When information was removed from human memory and placed within an administrative system, power began shifting toward those who controlled the records. This is why the Sumerian temple must be understood as something far broader than a place of prayer. In Sumerian, the word E2 could mean house, temple, estate, or household. The temple was the house of the god, but that house also included land, personnel, storehouses, and the economic activities necessary to maintain the entire organization. The Sumerians did not enter the temple and leave behind only a prayer. They brought barley oil, wool livestock, metal objects, and handcrafted products. One portion was used within ceremonies. One portion sustained the priests and staff. One portion maintained the laborers. Another portion was returned to production trade or construction projects. Therefore, the temple was both the residence of the god and a center for receiving, storing, and redistributing property. We may imagine it as a combination of a large farm, a warehouse, a production workshop, an administrative office, and a religious center. However, the temple was not a corporation in the modern legal sense. It possessed no shareholders' stock market or board of directors like companies today. The comparison with a corporation merely helps us recognize the degree of organization, many different departments operating together beneath one central ownership, tracking property, assigning labor, and measuring production. At Uruk, the large temple estates needed to record revenue expenditures and the quantities of goods distributed. That need played an important role in the development of writing. One of the earliest surviving texts lists approximately 120 titles and occupations ranging from the leader of the city, the person responsible for the law and the commander of plowing, to positions connected with livestock, priests, metalworkers, and potters. This reveals a society already divided into numerous specialized levels. One person was responsible for plowing. Another managed the flock of sheep. Someone else monitored the storehouse. All of them needed to be placed within a system so that their work could be connected. Imagine a city containing thousands of people, but possessing no employee lists, warehouse intake records, production reports, or food distribution schedules. The administrators would quickly lose the ability to maintain control. One group could receive rations twice. A storehouse could run short of goods without anyone accepting responsibility. A laboring team could disappear in the middle of a canal construction project. Writing solved those problems. It transformed a crowded city into a measurable system, and once a system could be measured, it could also be controlled. A clay tablet from the Uruk III period, dating to approximately 3,200 to 3,000 before Christ, records an account connected with beer production at the Temple of Inanna in Uruk. The record refers to approximately 134,813 liters of barley delivered over a period of 37 months to an official commonly read by the name or sign, Kingship, who was responsible for the operation of the brewery. Look at the scale of that number. This was not a woman brewing one jar of beer for her family. It was more than 130,000 liters of barley, tracked for more than 3 years, connected with a specific person responsible for it, and a production facility associated with the Temple of Inanna. The clay tablet functioned like a final account. It recorded the quantity of raw material. It recorded the period of time. It recorded the person responsible. And it confirmed that the operation had been completed. More than 5,000 years later, Any modern administrator would recognize that logic. A department receives raw materials. A person in charge signs for them. The activity continues through multiple accounting periods. Finally, a consolidated report is created to determine where everything went. The tool has changed. The principle remains the same. What makes the Kingship record especially significant is not merely that this may be one of the earliest known personal names. The more important point is that a human being was attached to an administrative responsibility. That person did not appear within a poem praising courage. He appeared because the system needed to know who was responsible for an enormous quantity of barley. Human identity entered history through labor. That is a detail highly compatible with the Anunnaki story. Within apparatuses, humanity was created to take over the labor of the gods. At Uruk, one of the earliest functions of writing was to track goods and distribute rations to the labor force. The mythological text and the administrative record do not directly prove one another, but they stand far closer together than many people realize. One story explains why human beings had to work. The writing system records how they worked. During its early stage, writing remained extremely limited. Many signs could not yet be used to record a long story or express abstract ideas, but they were capable of recording quantities, types of products, official positions, and stages of distribution. Over time, the system developed into complete cuneiform writing and was used to record laws, letters, prayers, medicine, astronomy, and great works of literature. However, its beginning remained closely connected with accounting and the administration of property. This forces us to reconsider the way civilization is commonly described. Human beings did not invent writing primarily to become more poetic. They invented it because the city had become too large to manage through spoken words. Administrative necessity came before many masterpieces of literature. The inventory appeared before the epic. The grain storehouse appeared before the library. The scribe was first an employee who kept the organization operating. At a site belonging to the Jemdet Nasr period, the British Museum preserves a ration list covering 5 days and dating to approximately 3000 before Christ. Each line corresponds to 1 day, while also recording the type of ration and the person or location receiving it. Imagine the scribe moving through 5 days of work. On the first day, a quantity of food was distributed to one group. On the second day, another portion was sent elsewhere. Every distribution left behind a trace. Because of this, the person in charge did not need to be present at the storehouse. He only needed to ask to see the clay tablet. This was the moment when power separated itself from physical presence. Before that, a person in authority had to stand at the location and observe. After the record-keeping system appeared, he could exercise control from a distance. A supervisor observed the workers. The scribe recorded the report. The administrator read the report. The king received the total, and the god was regarded as the ultimate owner of all the products. Within the interpretation of the Anunnaki hypothesis, this system resembles a project built through multiple levels. The beings at the highest level did not need to interact directly with every laborer. They only needed to create an apparatus capable of collecting sufficiently accurate data. How much barley did each field produce? How much raw material did each workshop consume? How much food did each laboring team require? Who was responsible? Who had fulfilled the obligation? Writing answered all those questions. If the Sumerian gods were only religious symbols, we are witnessing the birth of the urban administrative apparatus, an achievement developed by human beings to solve the complex needs of society. If the Anunnaki were real beings, writing may be regarded as the management technology required by the ruling class to monitor its labor force. The two explanations differ concerning the ultimate origin, but both meet at one truth: writing gave an organization the ability to see activities that one individual could not observe simultaneously. You can understand this through your own life today. When you arrive at work, the system does not require a person to stand constantly beside you and watch. An access card records the time you appear. Software records the work that has been completed. A bank account records your salary. The tax authority records your income. Your phone stores your location, time, and numerous other activities. Each individual record appears very small, but when they are connected, they create a detailed image of your life. The Sumerian clay tablet was a primitive version of that principle. It did not know what you were thinking, but it knew how much barley you had received. It did not track every step you took, but it recorded the name of the person responsible. It possessed no electronic database, but thousands of clay tablets placed beside one another could reconstruct the activities of an entire organization. That is the power of data. The person who holds the data can inspect. The person with the authority to inspect can judge. And the person with the authority to judge begins to control the flow of food that sustains human life. At many later Mesopotamian centers, administrative record-keeping continued to develop with an astonishing degree of detail. Texts tracked cultivated land, the distribution of products, the organization of labor and animal husbandry. Records from ancient Ur reveal that documentation focused upon exchanges of essential food, the division of cultivated land lists of workers, and the administration of livestock. A sacred district, possibly associated with the god Nana, administered large-scale economic activities, a substantial landed estate, and a personnel system containing multiple levels of management. This does not mean that every laborer was a slave. Sumerian society included many groups: free people, people dependent upon institutions, hired laborers, craftsmen, officials, priests, servants, and slaves. Their levels of freedom, obligations, and rights differed greatly. We must avoid combining the entire population into one single slave force. However, regardless of their status, people working for the institution still had to enter the record-keeping system. Once a name, duty, and ration appeared upon a clay tablet, human beings began to be viewed through measurable things. How many days of labor? How many products? How much barley? How many dependents? A mother, a child, or a craftsman possessed a personal life that the clay tablet could not record completely. But to the administrator of the storehouse, what mattered was the group to which they belonged and how much they needed to receive. This was the moment when human beings began becoming administrative units. A clay tablet from Girsu records barley rations for several groups, including women, children, and people with visual impairments. Other documents from Ummah record barley and bread distributed to female workers and their children belonging to various temples over periods lasting as long as 12 months. Behind those numbers were real human beings. They were hungry, they were tired, they had children to feed. But the clay tablet preserved only the information required by the organization. This was not necessarily cruelty. A densely populated city required a distribution system to prevent chaos and ensure that food reached the proper places. Record-keeping helped reduce losses, detect errors, and maintain operations throughout many agricultural seasons. However, the same tool could both protect human beings and control them. The clay tablet ensured that you received your ration. It also determined when that ration would stop. The system knew that you existed because you were included upon the list. If your name disappeared from the list, your access to the grain storehouse could disappear with it. Remember that food within Sumer was not merely a commodity, it was life. The climate of southern Mesopotamia demanded the control of water, the digging of canals, and the organization of agriculture on a large scale. A family separated from the irrigation network, the land and the storage system would face tremendous difficulties. When the temple and palace held important roles in coordinating these resources, economic dependence also created political submission. You worked for the organization. The organization gave you a ration. The ration sustained your body. Your body returned to work. Within the interpretation of apparatuses, human beings were created to bear the yoke of the god's labor. Within Sumerian administrative records, barley and rations became the means of keeping the labor force operating from one day to the next. The connection does not lie within a statement confirming that the Anunnaki invented payroll systems. It lies within the structure. A laboring species was created. Cities gathered them together. The king organized them. The temple held the property. The scribes recorded production. The rations maintained the labor force. If this was a project of control, every necessary component had begun to appear. From this point, the Anunnaki hypothesis presents a controversial interpretation. According to this view, writing was not merely a gift helping human beings communicate. It was management technology transferred so that a small group could administer an enormous labor force. The god Thoth in Egypt was associated with writing and measurement. Nabu in Babylon was associated with scribes. Nisaba in Sumer was connected with grain accounting and the art of recording. Many cultures believed that written knowledge came from the divine realm or was protected by a particular god. This reflects the reverence ancient societies held for writing. For supporters of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, it may also preserve the memory of teachers who gave humanity its first instrument of administration. But we must preserve a clear boundary. Archaeology confirms that early writing was closely connected with urbanization accounting and the need to administer goods. Religious texts connect knowledge with the gods. The claim that the Anunnaki directly designed writing as an instrument for controlling humanity belongs to the inference of a modern hypothesis. Regardless of which explanation you choose, the historical result was immense. Before writing power was limited by memory. After writing power could continue through time. A recorded command could survive after the person who issued it had died. An obligation could be transferred into the following month. A storehouse could be inspected across many years. A new king could receive the records of his predecessor and continue operating the same system. This is precisely why writing became the foundation of the state. It allowed power to live longer than human beings. And if the Anunnaki wanted to maintain influence across many generations, they did not need to continue living among the people forever. They only needed to create a system capable of remembering their commands by itself. The king received authority from heaven. The temple owned property in the name of the god. The scribes recorded everything. Later generations read the records and continued fulfilling the obligations. Once that structure operated steadily, the heavenly owner could withdraw from sight while the organization continued functioning. This is why the Sumerian temple may be regarded as one of the first great economic organizations in history. It gathered land laborers, storehouses, production ceremonies, and the record-keeping apparatus beneath a single center of power. But the most frightening point did not lie within the scale of the temple. It lay within the way the system began to view human beings. The laborer was no longer only a father, a mother, or a child within the community. In the eyes of the scribe, that person became a line upon a clay tablet, a number of working days, a quantity of barley, a ration of beer, an obligation requiring completion. And from that moment, control became far more precise. A whip could only force the body standing before the supervisor. A clay tablet could administer an entire city. It knew who had worked. It knew who had received food. It knew who still carried an obligation. And it knew how many products were flowing from the hands of laborers into the storehouse of the god. Therefore, the next secret no longer lies within statues, stars, or stories of spacecraft. It lies upon a small clay tablet just large enough to be held within the palm of the hand. Because once human beings were recorded as numbers, the system could measure their value through productivity. And when food became the reward for a number of working days, human beings began serving through more than their muscles. They served through their own need for survival. The clay tablet transformed human beings into units of labor. Darwin's theory of evolution. It is time to bring the truth to light. Think back to the extremely familiar illustration of evolution, a line of creatures standing one after another, with each figure standing more upright than the one before it, ending with modern human beings. At first glance, that sequence appears absolutely logical. But with today's three-dimensional software technology, or with only a single AI command, people can easily transform a fish into a human being through smooth movements. Our eyes automatically connect separate images into one continuous process. The obvious truth here is this: the graphic image is entirely an artificial product, avoiding every definition of scientific evidence. To confirm that one species truly transforms into another, we are required to examine fossils, genetic analysis, and direct observations in nature. Today, the pseudo-scientific and unnatural nature of the theory of evolution has become so clearly exposed that even people without specialized training in biology can recognize it. A representative example is Philip Johnson, a professor of law at the University of California, Berkeley, who became one of the pioneers in the effort to reclaim truth for biology, exposing the Darwinian doctrine's violation of natural law. For more than 20 years, Johnson continuously released a series of works criticizing the theory of evolution. Even as a scholar of law, he raised a challenging question. Can evolution be proved in a courtroom? That question served as the introduction to the book Darwin on Trial, published in the year 1991. In the year 1997, he released Defeating Darwinism by Open Minds. In the year 2006, he released Darwinism's Nemesis, and so on. Richard Dawkins is a famous evolutionary biologist. When he was asked, "Do you have any evidence that proves evolution?" Dawkins appeared stunned, remained silent, and thought for a very long time, without being able to answer, simply because there was no evidence to present. Search for the video titled Richard Dawkins, Stumped by Creationists Question. The entire theory of evolution, from Darwin's On the Origin of Species, published in the year 1859, and The Descent of Man, published in the year 1871, to later modern theories, consists of imagined hypotheses and uncertain speculation. Darwin's greatest speculation was the existence of transitional generations between species, because evolution was said to occur continuously and gradually. If species A evolved into species B, then intermediate species would necessarily have existed between A and B. These were called transitional generations or transitional links within the evolutionary chain from A to B. Those generations had become extinct. But according to Darwin, their fossils would necessarily lie beneath the ground in enormous numbers, and sooner or later, science would find them and would have to find them. Yet the greater this speculation became, the more Darwin worried about whether such a quantity of fossils would ever be discovered. If they were not found, his theory would be in danger. Yes, Darwin himself expressed this concern in On the Origin of Species, Chapter 9, as follows. The number of intermediate and transitional forms which must formerly have existed on the Earth must have been truly enormous. But why is every geological formation and every stratum not filled with such transitional links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain. And this perhaps is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against my theory. This means that even during Darwin's own lifetime, people had already worked to excavate and search for fossils belonging to transitional generations, yet found nothing. Since then, 156 years have passed since On the Origin of Species was published, and still nothing has been found. More than enough time has passed to reveal the truth. Transitional generations do not exist, simply because evolution does not exist. In other words, Darwin's great speculation was wrong because he believed evolution existed. Once again, it must be emphasized that Darwin clearly understood that the fossil issue would determine the life or death of his theory. The evidence is that he devoted an entire chapter of On the Origin of Species to this problem. That was Chapter 9, titled On the Imperfection of the Geological Record, in which he wrote, "The explanation lies, as I believe, in the extreme imperfection of the geological record." There it is. Darwin warned that the geological record, the search for fossils, was extremely incomplete. That is why Darwin's disciples had to find every possible way to fill the evolutionary gap between apes and human beings. They constructed a beautiful image of evolution from ape to man, then distributed it widely in order to implant within everyone's mind, especially the minds of children, the belief that evolution is a fact. With modern three-dimensional technology, many evolutionary images have been fabricated through masterful techniques of deception. The accompanying image is one example, but the fossils they use to fill the gap from ape to man are actually either 100% extinct monkeys or apes, or sometimes 100% human fossils from prehistoric antiquity. They can deceive the majority of people because most people are not specialists. But they cannot deceive honest biological experts. One example is Michael Denton, a famous Australian molecular biologist and the author of Evolution: A Theory in Crisis, published in the year 1985, in which he wrote, "Despite the enormous efforts made through geological excavation throughout the Earth, and despite the discovery of many strange animal forms previously unknown, the immense number of missing links within the evolutionary chain has still not been found, and the fossil record remains almost as discontinuous as it was when Darwin wrote on the origin of species." Terrified by the failure to find fossils beneath the ground, evolutionists invented another method searching for living fossils. This was the case at the beginning of the 20th century, when they accused the Aboriginal people of Australia of being a type of ape-man/man-ape, one of the so-called missing links they needed to discover in order to rescue the theory of evolution. Manhunts, captures, and massacres of Aboriginal people took place so that their skulls could be collected for research. This was a dark page in Australian history, a lingering wound within Australian society that is still not fully healed. Today, everyone clearly understands that this was a crime committed by people acting in the name of evolution. Yet the theory of evolution continues to be praised by closing one's eyes to the inhuman consequences it created throughout the world. Reaching its peak in German Nazism at the beginning of the 20th century, how much more humanity must people lose before they have enough courage to look directly at the truth and condemn the theory of evolution? Grenville Kent's question in Australia's Signs of the Times magazine. What Darwin taught Hitler still has not received an answer from any evolutionist. How could they answer it? Their own teacher, Charles Darwin, taught them that at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate the savage races throughout the world. Without Darwinian theory, especially its subsidiary theories such as eugenics and social Darwinism, neither Hitler nor the Nazi elements who followed him would have possessed the scientific foundation necessary to convince themselves and their collaborators that one of the most horrifying atrocities was actually worthy of moral praise. Richard Weikart, historian at California State University. That was the inevitable consequence of the theory of the struggle for survival, in which the strong defeat the weak, regarded as the driving force of evolution. Hitler simply applied that theory to human society. Darwin himself paved the road for Hitler. Darwin himself provided racism with a pseudo-scientific foundation through which it could commit crimes against humanity in the name of evolution. Li Zongwu in China exposed this inhuman nature of Darwinian doctrine at the beginning of the 20th century. But Darwinian doctrine lost credibility for more than its connection with Nazism. The primary reason for its loss of credibility lies within its unscientific nature, or more precisely, its anti-scientific nature. It is unscientific because it lacks evidence. Darwin's theory of the origin of species does not possess a single factual event within the natural world that confirms it. It is not the result of scientific research, but purely the product of imagination, quoted from page 13 of Witnesses Against Evolution by John Meldau, published by Christian Victory Publishing in the year 1968 in Denver, United States. It is anti-scientific because the entire theory is based upon an unrealistic mechanism: natural selection producing beneficial mutations across millions and billions of years and transforming one species into another. Michael Denton rejected this mechanism almost angrily. Nowhere was Darwin able to point to one authentic case in which natural selection had truly produced evolutionary transformation in nature. Ultimately, Darwin's theory of evolution is nothing more and nothing less than a mythological account of cosmic origins in the 20th century, quoted from pages 62 and 358 of Evolution: A Theory in Crisis by Michael Denton, published by Adler and Adler, Maryland, United States in the year 1986. Science has never witnessed a beneficial mutation. On the contrary, most mutations lead to disease and the destruction of living organisms. Natural selection, an imaginary mechanism, would not be foolish enough to select harmful mutations. In other words, natural selection does not operate, or more precisely, natural selection does not exist. Mathematics proves that the probability of millions or billions of consecutive beneficial mutations occurring throughout millions or billions of years of evolution is an amount effectively equal to 0. The possibility that mutation could produce evolution is entirely non-existent. Natural selection is an imaginary concept. Natural selection leading to evolution is a completely mythical story. Evolutionists conducted experiments in an attempt to produce mutations that would change one species into another, but they failed disastrously. For example, they performed radiation and chemical experiments upon fruit flies for more than 1,500 generations. The result was that flies remained flies. They never transformed into any other animal. Furthermore, throughout the following generations, many died, while others developed curled wings or extremely shortened wings. From the perspective of physics, mutation is a manifestation of the law of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, which states that matter changes in the direction of becoming increasingly degraded and disordered. Entropy is the quantity used to measure the degree of disorder within a system. The law of entropy affirms that entropy only increases and does not decrease, although it may remain unchanged during a short period. Mutation is one manifestation of increasing entropy. Therefore, mutation is a change moving in the opposite direction from evolution. Because evolution is the concept that things become increasingly highly organized and ordered. Thus, the theory claiming that mutation leads to evolution is completely wrong and contrary to nature. This imaginary and fabricated nature was strongly denounced in Evolution and the Emperor's New Clothes by N.J. Mitchell, published by Royden Publications in England in the year 1983. The following passage is quoted. "Scientists who are spreading the claim that evolution is a fact of life are deceiving others through credulity, and the story they are telling is a greater fraud than ever before. When explaining evolution, we do not possess even the slightest amount of truth." As the movement opposing the theory of evolution grows increasingly powerful, what is the attitude of evolutionists? They either remain silent, because silence is golden. The more attention the issue receives, the more clearly the true nature of evolution is exposed. In reality, those who oppose evolution are the people who want to make the matter public and bring evolution into court, as Philip Johnson sought to do. Evolutionists truly have fallen and continue to fall into an extremely embarrassing position, just as Richard Dawkins became embarrassed in the video mentioned above. However, the stubbornness of human nature surprises no one. Evolutionists continue going around in circles, making excuses. They are less honest than their own teacher, Charles Darwin. Indeed, Darwin was still far superior to his disciples in the honesty of his attitude. His concern regarding the absence of fossil evidence is a representative example. According to Adrian Desmond and James Moore in the book Darwin, published by W. W. Norton and Company in New York in the year 1991, pages 456 and 475, Darwin once confided to Asa Gray, "I am quite conscious that my speculations run beyond the bounds of true science. It is a mere rag of an hypothesis with as many flaws and holes as sound parts." To be honest, I respect Darwin more because of the confession above than because of his theory. But the more I respect his honesty, the more disappointed I become with the stubbornness of his disciples. They have deliberately concealed Darwin's confessions for a very long time, but the internet has caused them to fail. The truth is becoming increasingly exposed, and Soren Løvtrup's prediction will come true. One day, Darwinian doctrine will be ranked as the greatest deception in the history of science. Yet Charles Darwin has been honored by many books, newspapers, and websites as one of the greatest scientists of all time. Darwin, for example, is regarded as one of the 12 giants in Melvin Bragg's on giants' shoulders. On the Biography Online website, Darwin is honored as one of the 10 greatest scientists because he developed the theory of evolution despite disbelief and skepticism, collected evidence for 20 years, and published his conclusions in On the Origin of Species in the year 1859. It is absurd beyond description. I cannot find a second case in the history of science as absurd as this one. But regardless of how much effort is made to polish Darwin's reputation, Darwin's two principal works, On the Origin of Species, published in the year 1859, and The Descent of Man, published in the year 1871, are the two pieces of evidence that will bury Darwin's reputation. And before long, perhaps within a number of years or months, Darwinian doctrine will be ranked as the greatest deception in the history of science. The truth cannot be concealed forever. Here is one more piece of authentic evidence. Directly within this enormous fracture in Darwinian theory, numerous ancient texts throughout the world begin speaking at the same time. All primordial civilizations share one common memory. Deeply imprinted within the mind, human beings appeared through a project of deliberate intervention. Look directly at the record of ancient Egypt. They preserved the image of the god Khnum, molding the human body upon a rotating wheel. That rotating wheel corresponds perfectly with the centrifugal process of a technical device, where biological material crystallizes into a completed body. Turning to the Jewish book of Genesis, the text plainly records that the Creator used the dust of the ground to shape Adam, and then transmitted the breath of life into his body. Through a practical lens, the dust of the ground is the collection of fundamental chemical elements that form living beings upon this planet. That divine breath is the electrical current activating the entire nervous system of a biological machine. Crossing the ocean to the east, the Chinese legend of Nuwa also recounts that this goddess used yellow mud to manufacture human beings. The story of earth and mud as raw materials repeats according to exactly the same pattern throughout the world. But the most detailed foundational record lies completely within the textual system of the ancient Sumerians. The tablets record the process of manipulating flesh and blood with extraordinary clarity. The gods extracted the blood of a superior being and blended that blood with primordial clay. The result that emerged was our species. Now it is time to expose the truth behind these ancient words. Through the lens of practical science, all those powerful gods were genetic engineers known as the Anunnaki. They landed spacecraft upon the Earth and brought advanced devices capable of manipulating the genetic code. The dust yellow mud or clay represented the primordial stem cell mass of native hominids. The superior blood of the gods represented the perfect DNA sequence of the Anunnaki. These cosmic specialists extracted portions of their own genes and implanted them directly into the cells of earthly organisms. Our system of mythology is actually a medical report. This hybridization project created a workforce that was intelligent, obedient, and fully capable of satisfying their mineral extraction requirements. All civilizations are describing the same event, a great biological operation conducted inside a laboratory owned by extraterrestrials. This sudden intervention perfectly explains why the fossil record is completely empty of intermediate species. The Earth contains no half-ape, half-human skeletons simply because we rose into modern humanity overnight through advanced genetic editing technology, rather than crawling through millions of years of random evolution. The Anunnaki hybridization project aligns perfectly with humanity's sudden explosion of intelligence, completely shattering the spectacle of blind evolution that the academic establishment has forced into our minds throughout the past several hundred years. What is your perspective on this issue? Do not forget to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. That hybridization project has operated constantly for the past 400,000 years and remains highly active right now. The Anunnaki engineers supplied humans with survival knowledge, and simultaneously they established a perfect ruling system. The monetary system, religious institutions, and political structures of all nations play a key role in manipulating crowd psychology. All of those tools directly serve the purpose of managing the global workforce. Take a direct look at the daily operations of modern society. We work constantly, day after day, dedicating all our energy to serve a ruling group at the very top. This structure exactly replicates the labor model found in the ancient alien minds. With the extensive practical experience of a grown man, you have full capability to clearly identify the traps of this world. The rules controlling human labor and the repeating cycles of economic manipulation completely follow a pre-written script. You hold a deep awareness that humanity lives and works inside a massive resource extraction facility. The true rulers continue directing the financial flow and the power systems from classified locations. True history requires full exposure in the most direct and explicit way possible. Share your practical perspective in the comments section and tell me your thoughts on the level of Anunnaki control in our current society.
Press the subscribe button for the SleepCodex channel today to continuously track the upcoming shocking file. I will continue accompanying you on these journeys to solve the greatest mystery of humanity with you in the next video. Sleep well.